So hey guys, welcome back to the Just Fiction channel. This is a story about what if Naruto the Ice King in Highschool Dxd. Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if, and you want to see part 2, comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends. And check out the description. And check out my playlist. So let's start the video. Chapter 1, The Hero King. Life was too short for one to be weighed down by the fears implemented by social standards. No matter what anyone told him, Issei pursued his unsavory dream with determination. A single spark had all it took for him to go down the path of pleasure. His unwavering will had brought forth more pain than pleasure in the high school setting. Through reasons he did not think much on, he had been given a chance to fulfill his desires under the servitude of his new master, Rias Gremory. An unfortunate incident with a fallen angel had led to his reincarnation as a devil. Flirting with death was an experience he did not want to repeat. Yet, here he was again, with his life on the line fighting against the enemy who had killed him before. With his new life as a devil, he was no stranger to pain. Even though he had grown accustomed to the sensation, it did not lessen anything. Ha! You can't beat me, Issei. The fallen angel Rainer sneered with a twisted smile plastered onto her features. It will only be a matter of time until I get the twilight healing, and then I will be unstoppable. Ending her arrogant proclamation, Rainer's twisted smile grew in proportions as the light spear she held left her hand and found a place in Issei's leg. Seeing the pain and determination clash on the face of her target, Rainer's crazed laughter returned in full force. Simply catching a glimpse of Issei's expression was enough to bring forth a cry of ecstasy. Snippets of her laughter could only be heard by the newly reincarnated devil as he struggled to stand up with both of his legs impaled by light spears. Blood soaked every inch of Issei's body, saturating his school uniform to the brim, leaving him in nothing more than rags skewered by the spears Rainer so happily launched at him. For any devil, having not one, but both of their legs impaled by light spears, the weapons created to specifically combat them, was enough to force them to a stop. The burning light hungrily gnawing at Issei's demonic body could be heard, visibly bringing sadistic joy to Rainer. I'm going to find little Asia and rip the sacred gear right out of her. It's just too bad you won't be around to see it. The smell of burning flesh was heavy in the air, completely shrouding the metallic scent of blood that once occupied the space. Cynical laughter was all that was heard as Rainer's mirthful eyes lingered on Issei's brutalized body. As Rainer occupied herself with Issei, a rogue exorcist who had followed the pack of other rogues was engaged with a second devil just outside of the church. Whilst Rainer finished her joyous laughter, she gave Issei another sneer before walking away, leaving the mentally and physically wounded Issei bleeding on the church floor. She had a nun to hunt down and a sacred gear to retrieve. Issei would simply die of blood loss. She had wasted enough time on the pitiful devil. In a cloudless night, the moon proudly sat above heavens, casting a faint silver light upon the sleeping earth. Animals and humans alike slept in order to preserve energy for the upcoming day. Though many slept, there were a number of twinkling lights still visible through the thick blanket of darkness. Visible in the darkness was a giant floating fortress with a number of pillars and layers upon layers of plants entangled around the fortress walls, entangling amongst one and another. The fortress could be described as the unification of unsightly disorder and luxurious beauty. Light poured from the numerous floors, illuminating the night sky in a series of dazzling rays. Shining brighter than the swathe of stars above, the fortress held the touches of both elegance and trepidation. It truly was a sight to behold. Intimidating in image yet graceful in design, roaming the halls with a dignified grace, a woman with depraved beauty adorning a cloak as dark as the night sky shrouded her fragile frame. Eyes twinkling in a mischievous light, Semiramis continued to glide down the halls in graceful steps. Her august movements drew the attention of men and women alike. With gazes of yearning and awe from both sexes, Semiramis merely ignored them in favor of marching towards her destination. Navigating through the labyrinth of hallways, she soon found herself standing at one of the many balconies with company by her side. Standing beside her with a slightly arrogant smile on his features was Naruto Uzumaki. Blonde hair swaying in the gentle breeze, Naruto's bright blue eyes twinkled as he gazed at the blanket of stars. Naruto, I have news, Semiramis declared in a gentle voice. Oh? Naruto murmured as he turned his attention to the beauty beside him. Naruto held his steady gaze as his senses took in the pleasant aroma of fresh herbs the woman emanated. While the fragrance was alluring and seemed to be drawing him in, Naruto knew better than to allow the smell to intoxicate his mind. No matter how appealing the woman was on the outside, her intentions were what truly mattered. Semiramis was the reason Naruto's mind had been set in that way, the woman was an expert in utilizing her beauty to obtain her desires. The fragrance Semiramis emanated was possibly a poison created to cloud the mind of anyone who inhaled it, or an extremely well-made perfume. Naruto was leaning towards the former. "It's the girl you wanted me to keep an eye on, Asia Argento," Semiramis said as she leaned on the balcony, avoiding the blonde's gaze. The fallen angels seemed to have had an eye on her for quite some time. "A little birdie told me they plan on removing her sacred gear." Naruto mimicked Semiramis's movements and leaned forward, but his features were visibly tense. Fists gripping one another till the blood flow was forcefully stopped, Naruto's cool blue eyes narrowed to some degrees. Though the slight changes in his posture were hardly noticeable, Semiramis had known the blonde far too long to miss the sudden changes. Her curiosity that had sparked when Naruto had asked her to perform the task had flared to life once again. Brushing a stray strand of hair to the side, Semiramis shifted her gaze from the blonde to the dark forest below the floating fortress. "Are you going to tell me why you wanted me to keep an eye on the girl? In exchange, will you allow me control of the Hanging Garden?" Exchanging a look, Naruto gave the woman a challenging expression, and she too gave one of her own in return. Neither breaking away from the contest of wills, Naruto had finally relented when a gentle breeze brushed against his exposed skin and returning his attention to the matter at hand. Semiramis followed in kind as the two shifted their attention to the stars once again. Ignoring the feeling of nervousness consuming his mind, Naruto turned to Semiramis once again. The mere idea of Semiramis allowing Naruto control of the floating fortress-like structure was absolutely out of the world. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon was Semiramis's treasure. Allowing members of their little group occupy the interior had taken excessive amounts of negotiation. Allowing someone other than herself control the structure was simply out of the question. "Will you help me? Have I not been helping you? You know what I mean. I need your help to send me to Ko." Semiramis did not answer immediately as she eyed Naruto for a minute or so before she sighed. With a flick of her wrist, a black magic circle shimmered into existence. Giving her a nod of appreciation, Naruto placed himself on top of the magic circle. As magic particles began dancing a coruscating waltz, Naruto held his gaze with Semiramis. Just before the magic circle consumed him and transported him away, a final decision had been made. "She's important to me." As those final words left Naruto's mouth, the blonde was consumed by the magic circle. Semiramis eyed the spot where Naruto had once occupied. Lips twitched ever so slightly, Semiramis swiftly left the balcony with long, graceful strides. Getting out that much from the prideful Uzumaki was considered a win in her books. Outside of Chow Chow, Semiramis doubted anyone knew anything personal about the blonde. Bounding down the empty streets of Ko, Asia's eyes were wide with fear. Shallow breaths were all she could hear as she continued to run down the baleful streets. Devoid of any signs of life, Asia's mind still lingered on the events that had transpired in the abandoned church. Moments such as these always reminded her of the curse of weakness that plagued her life. It had always been like this. No matter what horrendous acts someone committed, Asia could not bring herself to fight them. Fighting went against her very nature. Taught by the church, Asia's ideals reflected her pacifistic upbringing among the idealistic priests on a small village. No matter what, she could not bring herself to hurt another being. The thoughts that were running amok in her mind were forcefully suppressed when a loud jeer resonated above her. Well, if it isn't the nun. Why don't we go back to the church? Our session isn't over yet." Rainer's cruel voice cut through the ominous silence like a hot knife through butter. Asia was stopped dead in her tracks as she turned to face the fallen angel. Shaking in both frustration and fear, the nun could do nothing but stare at her soon-to-be killer with fear-ridden eyes. Heart pounding in anticipation, Asia could feel the surge of energy provided by the dose of adrenaline pumping into her body. Yet she did not move. Even with an opportunity to escape the clutches of the fallen angel, she did not take it. No matter how she denied it, Asia knew deep in her raging heart she could not escape. Issei had bought her time in order to escape Rainier, and she had not gotten very far before the fallen angel had found her. A feeling of defeat filled the empty void that once housed her hope. Biting her lips in order to restrain the tears burning away at her eyes, Asia could not help herself as guilt soon found its way into her damaged heart and ran its course. If Rainer was here, then Issei was probably dead. Issei-san, I'm sorry. This is all my fault. Asia thought as her blurred vision turned away from the fallen angel. First, her brother had been brought down by her, and now Issei had fallen because of her weakness. Unconsciously digging her nails into her exposed palm, Asia could feel fresh blood escape from her self-inflicted injuries. Rainier was smiling joyously as she witnessed more suffering. Her twisted smile never left as she slowly descended from the sky and landed before the girl. Snatching Asia's arm in a firm grip, Rainier gave the girl a murderously glare as she began adding more and more pressure on her hold. If you ever run again, I will kill you. Rainier hissed, yanking Asia closer to her. Rainier dug her claw-like hands into the girl's bare arm. Aside from the joy she had received from watching the suffering of both Issei and Asia, she knew her plans had been delayed by quite a few hours. Using her free hand, Rainier delivered a sharp blow to the girl's cheek, drawing out a small cry of pain. Satisfied with her work, Rainier unleashed her wings and prepared to take flight. Just as her wings began carrying her upwards, a golden flash caught her attention right before an object impaled one of her wings. Screeching in pain, Rainier immediately dropped Asia as she too collapsed onto the earth with both her wings pierced. Upon impact, the objects had not only tore two glaring holes into her wings, but they also pushed her back significantly, creating distance from herself and Asia. Asia's body fell freeing down to the earth as the girl allowed gravity to do its job. Not fighting the fundamental force dragging her down, Asia awaited the back-breaking pain from impact, but it never came. Instead of a painful landing, Asia had collapsed against a much softer object. You're grown so much. Asia's tired eyes shifted until they finally gazed directly at her savior. Past the patch of unruly blonde hair, a familiar pair of gentle blue eyes returned her gaze. Heart leaping in surprise, Asia could only stare at the blonde. Big brother? Asia murmured before unconsciousness consumed the blonde nun, leaving her in the arms of Naruto. Gently shifting Asia's body into a more comfortable position, Naruto's gentle gaze soon hardened as an untamed ferocity entered his eyes. Raising his head to glare at the screeching fallen angel, Naruto's eyes flared in a fiery rage. Rainier ceased her screeches as her shivering body finally recovered from the brutal attack. Forcing herself onto her feet once again, Rainier's sadistic gaze heated. Forming a light spear in one hand, Rainier glared at her mysterious attacker. But compared to the glare she was receiving, her own murderous glare paled in comparison. In normal situations, the fallen angel would have begged for mercy or ran for her life, but this was far from normal. Blinded by her rage and deprivation of power, Rainier could no longer restrain herself. Shrouding her mind in a thicket of murderous intent, Rainier now found someone to unleash it on. You! Do you know who I am? Rainier hissed as killing intent leaked from her body like a flood. I will kill you for that. Silence, you crow! Naruto snarled. Your presence in this world is no longer welcomed. Scatter! With that declaration, the space behind the blonde began distorting in a haze as golden ripples opened way for an array of weapons to come forth. Swords and spears alike sprouted from the hundreds of golden halos. Each and every weapon held all sorts of eye-catching ornaments. Even in the dark of night, the weapons shimmered in an ethereal shine. The weapons bustled in the air after Naruto's verdict. One after another, every weapon launched from the golden halos like bullets of mass destruction. The air was obscured with dust from the pulverized ground. Rainier's screams of surprise only lived for mere seconds as the thunderous impact of the weapons consumed all. Settling down, the shroud of dust vanished, exposing the world to the destructive scene left behind by the blonde. Rainier was no more. There was no other possible way of saying it. The fallen angel Rainier was no more. Nothing was spared after Naruto's declaration. Scatter she did. Pieces of her once whole body splattered the decimated streets of Kuo. Blood splattered in every which direction, painting whatever was left of the streets in a crimson hue. Rainier's body, whatever was left of it, held the appearance of suffering a savage death in the hands of animals. Bones cut into pieces with bits of muscle and skin left attached to them all were a common theme. Shimmering in the gore, the weapons launched at Rainier shimmered in their ethereal hue once again and disappeared in particles of golden light. Only her head remained unscathed, left laying in a pool of her own blood. The horror-stricken face simply said it all. Oh ho, so this is the girl? Giving Semiramis a nod in response, Naruto eyed her with a neutral gaze as the black-clad woman sauntered forward. Overlooking Asia's unconscious body with a critical gaze, the poison-loving woman returned to hold Naruto's neutral gaze. Breaking their senseless staring contest, Semiramis walked to the table saturated with an array of foods and drinks. Pouring herself a cup of wine from the available selections, the woman took a sip and her features immediately scrunched in dissatisfaction. A frown graced her elegant features as it remained frozen in a look of displeasure. The wine was pitiful compared to the types she had the pleasure of consuming. I thought you had better taste than this, Naruto, Semiramis said in a tone fitting of her irritation. I do, Naruto responded as the air behind him shimmered and twisted as a golden gate opened the way for a bottle and 2 cups to appear. Much like his weapons, both bottle and cup were made of gold and heavily decorated by gems and jewels alike. Handing Semiramis a cup, Naruto poured the contents of the bottle inside and did so for himself. Tossing her previous drink into the bin of trash, Semiramis took a sip of the blood-red wine. The aroma did the drink no justice. A simple sip had been intoxicating. The liquor, no, nectar was something only imaginable by the mind. Such a taste was heavenly compared to the wine she had consumed prior. Neglecting her own facade of neutrality, her frown had soon dispersed upon the taste of the divine nectar. It seems my selection is quite pleasing, no? That snapped Semiramis out of her trance. Crumpling her lips together, she turned to Naruto and gave him a slightly irritated look. The arrogance lacing his own voice had been enough to spark a flare of anger. Yet, a part of her questioned the contents she had consumed with such vigor. Such a drink seemed impossible to brew by mere human hands. As a master in the art of creating poisons and brewing other forms of liquids, she could not point out a single mistake in the drink. It was as if it were made the gods themselves. It was a revelation that paved way for a new question in her mind. What is this made from? I don't think human hands could brew such a drink. Whether it is weaponry or wines, I only have the best. You should have known this by now, Semiramis. There was that arrogance once again. Lips twitching in anger, Semiramis merely placed herself in one of the many seats left available and sent Naruto a silent glare. When it came to liquors and other forms of drinks, she had prided herself in creating the best. In a matter of minutes, her pride had taken a blow. Unwilling to let the strike go unapproached, she leaned into her seat and pondered on the contents her taste buds had been exposed to. The taste was heavenly yet indescribable at the same time. Without a proper flavor to compare the taste to, she was hardly able to point out any mistakes. And did you use your best to brutalize the fallen angel? Semiramis asked as her tone calmed and her graceful voice returned. Humph, a mongrel such as herself cannot fathom what honor she had received. To have been touched by my treasures alone was far more than a cut like she deserved. Shaking her head, Semiramis pondered on the blonde's words. The gate of Babylon was a grand power blessed upon the blonde. From what little knowledge she had on the ability, she could say it was one of the stronger abilities wielded by the members of their little group. The ability to call forth what seemed like an endless array of weaponry. It was no wonder Naruto pitched the weapons like mere stones. Her only experience with the ability had been limited, and thus her knowledge of it was scarce. There was only one person she could deem knowledgeable on it, yet he refused to answer her questions. If the girl is important to you, then why didn't you bring her in long ago? Naruto did not show any outright reaction to the question as he took a gulp of the drink in his hand. A scowl marred his features as his mind wandered. I refuse to involve her in our plans. For her own safety, it is best she did not affiliate herself with me. To complete my ambition, I cannot risk her when I embark on the path of blood. Nodding her head in acceptance, Semiramis quieted down. Neither spoke any more words as they enjoyed the pleasantries offered by the heavenly nectar. A series of knocks rang from the door and a servant entered. Lord Naruto, Lady Semiramis, Lord Chao Chao have asked for your attendance in a meeting. A servant said as he swiftly bowed to them both. Grunting in annoyance, Naruto walked out of the room, outright ignoring the servant. Giving him a graceful smile, Semiramis followed only steps behind the blonde. Inside a well-lit room, 8 seats placed behind a large circular table. With 6 of the 8 occupied already, 2 remained open for use. Flying proudly at the room's end, a banner of red and gold sat. A number of other decorations furnished the room, giving it a lavish outlook. Filling the seats were 6 unique individuals who all had varying expressions on the remaining members' absence. From annoyance to amusement, none of them had the same outlook on the situation. Time ticked away as a cloud of silence descended upon the group. None of them spoke as they all found a form of distraction to bypass the wait. Chao Chao, the leader of the hero faction, sat in silence. His messy black hair cascading down his head, and his brown eyes shimmered in amusement. Though his eyes held amusement, it was masked behind a mask of indifference. As the leader of their faction, Chao Chao lived for order amongst the members. Yet, no matter how many times he preached it, Naruto and Semiramis both cared little for his rules and showed up only when they wished to. Next to him was Jean, a young girl who possessed a wondrous beauty limited only by the innocence brimming from her calm blue eyes. Unlike a few of the members who were descendants of heroes, Jean carried the spirit of her ancestor, Joan of Arc, her ancestor that now resided in her own body, providing her with the skills and abilities wielded by Joan long ago. Beside Jean was Siegfried, the descendant of the legendary hero, Sigurd. Adorned in a set of steel armor drawing attention to his snow-white hair, Siegfried's bemused blue eyes only shined on as time slowly ticked by without a conclusion in sight. George, a bespectacled young man with a patch of sloppy black hair and a pair of bored brown eyes, simply sighed in annoyance. Though his time was occupied by a book he had carried around, it did not stop his annoyance of the situation to grow. He had already disliked Naruto's lack of respect towards Chao Chao, and situations such as these only infuriated him further. The only one who did not really mind the tardiness of his fellow members was Leonardo. Though it was impossible to really tell what emotion Leonardo was really feeling, with an emotionless mask always on his young face, there was really no way of telling. The most vocal of his displeasure was Heracles. The descendant of the Greek hero Heracles, he was an extremely muscular man with choppy black hair and a permanent scowl marring his rough features. Growling at his wasted time, Heracles could only glare at the double doors in distaste. In no longer than a few minutes, the doors opened and Naruto walked in, followed closely behind by Semiramis. Neither of them even cared for the gazes directed at them. As they seated themselves in the remaining chairs, Cao Cao coughed into his hands and drew attention to himself. Eyeing all 7 pairs of eyes staring at him, a moment of silence passed by before the meeting began. With no one willing to mouth a word after the arrival of both Naruto and Semiramis, Cao Cao decided to take the initiative. It is time we make ourselves known. Chapter 2, Secrets in the Dark. Roaming the halls of the Hanging Gardens with no real destination in mind, Naruto wore a look of annoyance as he sent a silent glare at his unwelcomed companion. Walking beside him in long, graceful strides was Semiramis. The graceful woman was either oblivious to his annoyance, or she simply chose to ignore it. Naruto was leaning towards the latter. This was not the first time she had been keen on accompanying him, either welcomed or not. Drawing attention from other occupants of the fortress, the wave of silent murmurs only multiplying his annoyance. Perhaps it was the gnawing unease produced by his sister's condition that had ignited the aggravation swelling in his heart. Semiramis's persistence to accompany him did not quell the emotions pounding in his chest either. Bypassing a small crowd of occupants, Naruto headed straight for his chambers. It did not take long for a mischievous smile to play on her lips. Leaning closer to the blonde, Semiramis steadily breathed down his exposed neck and spoke in an alluring tone. "How bold, already taking me to your room." Ignoring her words, Naruto continued to walk past her without a single hint of acknowledgement toward her words. Semiramis's lips jerked into what looked like a pout. Shaking off the spark of annoyance, Semiramis's smile returned in full force. Perhaps it was the prospect of a challenge that had ignited a glimmer of excitement. Her first impression of the blonde had been less than satisfactory. His arrogance and dismissive of anything he deemed unworthy of his attention had been a factor in her annoyance. Yet, a part of her desired to break the permanent neutrality that adorned his visage. That could have been a possibility for her interest in the blonde. "Why do you follow Cao Cao?" Semiramis asked suddenly as she stared at the blonde in question. "I do not follow Cao Cao," Naruto replied with annoyance obvious in his voice. "I am merely working alongside him. As long as our interests align, I see no reason to make more enemies." "And what will you do when Cao Cao's interests change?" "Those accords he made, you did not favor them. No matter what, I shall continue to pursue my goals." Semiramis pondered on his words with narrowed eyes. Naruto seemed far too nonchalant about the situation at hand. Her persistence had only brought forth a snippet of information, but it was far too paltry to paint an accurate picture of Naruto's motives. Compared to Cao Cao, Naruto was a wild card. His actions were unpredictable yet expected at the same time. Complete dualities that he managed to perfectly blend into his actions. Even so, she could not deny the sense of excitement swelling in her chest. The curiosity for the blonde had only grown over time, and she was determined to find answers for her tabled questions. It did not matter if he ignored his comment about Cao Cao's newly formed accords. The goals worked so desperately to complete were far more interesting. The absolute feeling of elation was all Rizavim felt. His joyous emotion reflected on his maniacal laughter as it filled the cavern he occupied. Echoing throughout the dingy underground chamber, an overwhelming explosion of joy consumed his heart. Never in his life had he experienced such a feeling. By far, this was the most emotional he had been for as long as he could remember. Everything he had done was leading to this event. Now, with success just around the corner, the feeling of elation was not unexpected. Climbing an altar damaged by time, his eyes focused on a glimmer of crimson-red energy resonating from the distance. Running his hands against the century-old stone and caking his hand in the process, the twisted smile marring his pale visage widened. His laughter was crazed and unchained, a laugh filled with uncontrolled glee. Trailing behind Rizavim was his ever-so-loyal follower, Euclid Lucifuge. The super devil was far too occupied with his glee to have cared for his surroundings. Just over the horizon was the main component of his grand scheme. Laying on top of the massive altar was the beast that would bring forth a new world order. A beast so powerful, the biblical god himself had been forced to add extra seals over the existing set for safety. Trihexa, or more commonly known as 666, the beast of the Bible. The seals placed upon Trihexa were all forbidden seals which required a great deal of work to bypass. But with the prospect of unstoppable might, whatever endeavor he had to endure would be ultimately worth it. Shattering the biblical god's forbidden seals would take some time, but the final seals placed upon Trihexa would be an issue. Reaching the altar's peak, Rizavim gazed upon Trihexa's sleeping form with waves of delight escaping his shaking form. Unlike many whom would shake in fear upon the sight of Trihexa, Rizavim's body shook in pure excitement. Even though Trihexa slept, an overwhelming force of ruinous energy absconded its form. Simply standing in the beast's aura was enough to draw forth a twitch of insanity in Rizavim's heart. Any normal human standing in its presence stood no chance of remaining sane. Sweeping away his fascination, Rizavim released another laugh. A laughter of pure insanity. No longer did the light of compos mentis linger in his eyes. Deluged with euphoria, Rizavim simply stood there cackling before the apocalyptic beast. "Lord Rizavim, is this it?" Euclid managed to ask. "Is this Trihexa? The apocalyptic beast?" "Yes, Euclid. Yes." Rizavim bellowed in his demented voice. "This is the key to my ambition. This glorious creature you see before you will clash with Great Red himself. Once we awaken it from its slumber, the world will be mine." Euclid merely stood there with his mind racing. Though his unwavering loyalty kept him by Rizavim's side, a part of him questioned his lord. A beast as powerful as Trihexa seemed out of Rizavim's reach. A beast greater than Great Red himself slept before him, the same beast that his lord wished to control. The appearance of Trihexa had been enough to beat the breath right out of his chest. The dull black fur that shrouded its primate body shone in a musky light as the 7 separate heads of 7 different monstrosities with a crown of horns adorning the top slept soundly. Standing before it felt like he stood before the reincarnation of destruction itself. No, he was standing before the reincarnation of destruction. A feeling of the homicidal aura that eluded its slumbering form was enough evidence of the claim. "My lord, what of the other seals?" Euclid asked as he finally regained control of his senses, overcoming the mixture of awe and fear that had forcefully taken hold of his mind. "Ah, yes. The seals placed upon Trihexa by the damned Uzumakis," Rizavim mused. "If knowledge proves to be correct, there's one Uzumaki remaining. In order to destroy the annoying seal, a sacrifice is needed. For only the blood of an Uzumaki will awaken Trihexa from his century-long slumber." "Will it be enough, my lord?" Thousands of the clan had sacrificed their lives in order to create the blood seal. Will one be enough? If one is not enough, then I shall use the Holy Grail to bring back the ones that have died. No matter what, the Uzumakis are the key to our plan. The last Uzumaki shall be the one to awaken Trihexa. After his chaotic declaration, Rizavim released another insane chortle. The prospect of showering the Uzumaki-built altar with their own blood was enough to bring forth laughter. The immense swirl that Trihexa had slept on would soon be painted in the blood of the Uzumakis. Anticipating the destruction Trihexa would bring forth when awoken was better than any drug. Thinking about it resulted in the shivers of excitement bubbling in his heart. "My apologies to Lord Chao Chao, but no one without Lord Naruto's consent may enter this room." Standing outside a room in the medical ward, Chao Chao frowned at the handsome man garbed in green robes who stood between himself and the door. A twinge of annoyance and anger ignited in his heart as the frown that marred his face only deepened. Seeing no signs of hesitance from the green-clad man before him, Chao Chao's impatience was beginning to show. The repetitive phrase uttered by the man only adding more pressure into his already growing frustration. "Diarmuid, stand down. I am the leader of the hero faction, not Naruto. I hold authority over the faction, not him. I will not ask you again, get out of the way." Chao Chao muttered with a savage wave of annoyance dripping into his tone. "I cannot do that. My lord's orders come before all others." The newly named Diarmuid responded. Ignoring the growing frown that impaired the Longinus wielder's countenance, Diarmuid's determination only grew after the comment made by Chao Chao. "The lord ordered that no one enter the room without his consent. Even you, Lord Chao Chao." Diarmuid's loyal declaration had only managed to fuel Chao Chao's frustration. Not only did one of his subordinates dismiss his orders and favor another member's, he seemed to be finding these actions more common. After Naruto's declaration of distaste over his decision involving the hero faction, more and more members that had loyalty towards Naruto became harder to control. Diarmuid was one of the most prominent members loyal to Naruto. If any conflict were to break out between himself and Naruto, Diarmuid was in obvious danger with his skill set and the unwavering loyalty that drove him forward. Chao Chao, what a pleasant surprise. Walking through the halls with a neutral expression and a tone that did not betray his visage, Naruto approached both of them, followed closely by Semiramis. Chao Chao shook off his frustrated frown and replaced it with a smile, or what disfigured smile he managed to form with the negative emotions plaguing his heart. The issue that had been in the air had been tormenting the faction needed to be resolved. A conversation with Naruto would shine some light on the issue. Or perhaps add more fuel to the raging flames. "Naruto." Chao Chao acknowledged with a nod. Facing the blonde, Chow Chow had eliminated his disfigured smile and an obvious frown took its place. Semiramis, Chow Chow. Semiramis greeted with her usual smile. Giving Semiramis a nod, Naruto returned his attention to Chow Chow. Semiramis, on the other hand, walked past them both and made her way towards Diarmuid. Acknowledging her with a nod, Diarmuid kept his gaze on Chow Chow. If need be, the ever-so-loyal man readied himself for an intervention. It was no secret that both men had clashing ideals when it came to situations involving the hero faction. A fight was keen to happen if words did not solve the issue at hand. Knowing Naruto and his lack of concern of issues that did not pique his interest, both Diarmuid and Semiramis expected a fight if Chow Chow sparked Naruto's anger. The need for privacy had directed both Naruto and Chow Chow into the less populated areas of the floating garden. With no exchange of words as of yet, Chow Chow was attempting to find a solution in order to appease Naruto and quell his distaste. The situation was dire. If Naruto decided to abandon the faction and leave, a good number of the members would follow him. Though a number of them Chow Chow would care if they stayed or not, a small group of Naruto's followers were indeed important to the fighting strength of the hero faction. Semiramis and Diarmuid were both candidates in that area. If they lost Diarmuid, Siegfried would be tempted to leave. Losing someone he deemed as his rival would be a driving force in that decision. Now, if Semiramis had decided to support Naruto and leave, it would leave the hero faction in a vulnerable state. Losing Semiramis meant losing their base of operations and spy network. Chow Chow could not afford to lose either one. Naruto, I understand you are not pleased with the direction the hero faction is going in, Chow Chow began, slowly testing the waters with caution hidden behind a sigh. But if this continues any longer, then the hero faction will fall. The members loyal to you are unwilling to listen to. I have amused you for long enough, Naruto said as his eyes narrowed in annoyance. I have participated in your meaningless games for far too long. You are only leading the faction because I have little interest in doing so. Do not take my kindness for granted, mongrel. The only reason you still breathe is because of him. Chow Chow's smile strained drastically as his eyes glimmered in rage. The tone used on him only added to his fury. Appeasing Naruto was going to be tough, there was no doubt about it. Naruto's arrogance had no bounds. Chow Chow prided himself as the wielder of the true Longinus, the strongest of all 13 Longinuses. With the potential to destroy the world, being talked down by Naruto damaged his pride. Making no remark to Naruto's words only ignited his fury further. At his situation now, he could not afford more enemies. Having Naruto as an enemy was not something he would look forward to. While Naruto had his ambitions, he had his own. The desire to pit humans against other mythologies. In order to test humanity's limits, he needed to accumulate enough strength in order to fulfill his ambition. Naruto, enough, I grow tired of this. My patience has reached its limit. If you test my patience once more, the wishes of my dear friend shall no longer be heeded. I advise you to not. I have little time to spare for you. Completing his sentence, Naruto walked away without a look at the hero faction's leader, leaving behind an enraged Longinus wielder to his thoughts. As he left, Chow Chow slammed his fist against the stone walls in indignation. Eyes boiling in restrained rage, Chow Chow allowed the emotion to escape through the punches dealt on the wall. It was only a matter of time now. When preparations for his plan were made, dealing with Naruto would come soon enough. For now, he would play by the Uzumaki's rules. Then he would draw blood. Azazel stood over the destroyed streets of Ko with an analytical gaze piercing the shroud of magical energy surrounding the streets. The ruling devils had erected an illusion over the street in order to draw mortals away, buying time in to fix the streets before opening it to the mortals once again. Even so, his visit to Ko had been purely for research, and he had not been disappointed. Leaving Grigori in the hands of his subordinates and brothers, his search for a Longinus had ended in success somewhat. It was just too bad Issei Hayata had been turned into a devil. If he had not, opportunities to study the Longinus would be much more common. But the trip had not been a total loss. Besides the backlash created by some of his subordinates' actions, Azazel had discovered a much more interesting figure to study. Occupying the spot where Rainier had been brutalized by what could only be described as a pack of savage animals, Azazel could not deny his interests in the death. Aside from pulverized rubble and gaping hollows, remnants of blood still lingered in uncleaned areas of the destroyed streets, and the metallic smell of fresh blood still dawdled in the air. Reminiscence of magic was eroding from the attack on Rainier. Only fragments of magic still lingered. Scattered in every direction, magic particles drifted off into the sky before vanishing completely. Whoever had obliterated Rainier had bombarded her magical attacks that had an unnatural amount of magic in whatever was sent her way. The more his mind wandered on this situation, the more his interest grew. You asked for me, Lord Azazel? Azazel turned to the source of the voice and nodded his head in response. Standing inside the shadows, a handsome young man with a large, midnight black dog seated by his side. Tobio Accuse and his independent sacred gear named Jean. Tobio Accuse was one of Grigori's strongest fighters with immense combat capabilities, being one of the few humans capable of going head-to-head with powerful beings others could not. His sacred gear was one of the 13 Longinus Canis Lycaon. A sacred gear that had a mind of its own that allowed the user to utilize shadows for offense, as well as utilize blades. Tobio, I have a little job for you. You heard what happened to Rainier? Azazel began as he received a nod before continuing. I want you to find out who did it. Take /dog team with you. Whoever did this, I want to know about. Very well, Lord Azazel. Tobio replied as he left with Jean following loyally from behind. Returning his attention to the destruction left behind by Rainier's killer, a twinkle of interest filled his eyes. Whoever did this could be a possible threat in the future. Sunlight danced across the skyline as the sun slowly climbed higher and higher. Birds sang their unorchestrated melodies, gracing the earth with a symphony of chirps. A gentle breeze swept through the sea of trees, brushing against branches and sending leaves into a sedate waltz. Burning past the lingering aspects of night, morning bloomed into existence. Awakening from their slumber, humans and animals alike began performing their morning rituals, keen on starting the day right. Though the day had just begun, Naruto was wide awake, going through the motions of a normal day. Basking in the sun's warm embrace, the blonde panted lightly as he stood in a field choked with weapons. Swords, spears, pikes, axes, halberds, you name it, he had it. An arrangement of weapons surrounded him in a circular formation. Impaling the sword he wielded, Naruto exchanged it in favor of a spear. Effectuating a dance with the spear in hand, a second exchange came. Sheathing the spear into the earth once again, the blonde returned his attention towards other weapons he had yet to practice with. Owning an almost unlimited arsenal of weapons under his command, mastering every weapon was simply beyond him. A single weapon residing in his treasury had taken a single hero an entire lifetime to master. Sure, a number of heroes had managed to master more than a single weapon, but an arsenal of every treasure bestowed upon humanity, impossible. Yet that never stopped Naruto from continuing his uphill battle. Every single treasure residing in his vault had a unique ability differentiating it from others. Mastery over a single weapon unlocked doors hidden to the tenderfoot. His ambition of slaying the apocalyptic beast required power. There was no way around it. Trihexa was the beast of the Bible, a monster so great that the biblical god risked his life in order to prevent whatever seals left binding it from eroding. With power that was said to outmatch Great Red, the dragon of dragons, it was beyond foolish to challenge Trihexa. Challenging it only brought forth a one-way ticket straight towards purgatory, or however long one spent inside the underworld. If Trihexa was unleashed, a team-up between Great Red and Ophis the Ouroboros dragon could only defeat him. Even so, Trihexa's nature to destroy covered all. No matter if one was an angel or a devil, upon its awakening, all whom dwelled upon the world would die, scattered into the vast emptiness that Trihexa would forge. Big brother. Naruto's thoughts faded towards the back of his mind. Turning his head towards the source of the call, Naruto stopped his movements and hushed his panting. Regaining breath and eliminating the need to refill his supply of oxygen, Naruto calmed his nerves. Running towards him with a basket in hand was Asia. Awoken from her traumatic slumber, the girl had rebounded quickly. Their first meeting in years had been short and lacked any real conversation between the two. Simple snippets of a real conversation were formed and Naruto had left. His actions regarding his hasty retreat branched from the mixture of anger and small hints of fear that took hold of his heart. An unlikely fear of losing Asia was enough to drive him away. Asia. Naruto acknowledged as he dismissed his weaponry with a flick of the wrist. Big brother, I brought you breakfast. Miss Semiramis said you would be here. Asia replied with a smile exploding from her gentle features. Placing the basket containing food, Asia shuffled awkwardly before him. Naruto, on the other hand, studied her form and shifted his attention onto the food delivered by his sister. Digging her nails into the unprotected portions of her tender flesh, Asia nervously stood there looking over her brother. A train of thoughts rushed through her mind as hundreds of scenarios played without an end. Emotions ran thick in her scenarios, all of them pushing her mind towards possibilities as to why Naruto had left her. With no end to her nervous thoughts, Naruto had decided to do something he had been deprived of for so long. He smiled. Thank you. From despair to elation in a matter of seconds, Asia's anxious smile brightened dramatically. A wave of euphoria washed over her form, cleansing her mind of negative thoughts that had taken hold. Clear of her doubt, Asia could only nod in response to Naruto's short words and smile. Growing up beside Naruto had always been strange, to say the least. A brother that held abilities that far outshone many grown men, Naruto was always training his body and mind. Events prior to the travels alongside her brother were blurry and out of place. From what she was able to gather, an incident had forced Naruto away from their parents, with only her as company. There was just too much she did not understand to fully form an opinion of the events thus far. Big brother. Asia stopped herself from completing her sentence as her lips crumpled together. Big brother. I missed you. The heartfelt words had caught Naruto's attention. What decisions he had made were not perfect, far from it. Leaving Asia behind in the care of the church was a mistake altogether. But his path in life was beyond dangerous. Taking her along in order to fulfill the ambition passed down from each generation in the Uzumaki clan had its own set of faults. Following him would only lead to more pain and suffering. The church had been much more promising. Armed with a gentle heart, Naruto had not expected Asia to have been abandoned. Twisted anger was all he felt. The church was clearing wrong on their decision and radical beliefs, and Asia was a mere victim of the status quo. I missed you too, Asia. Naruto replied as the smile he wore flattened to some degree. And I am sorry. His sister suffered because of his decisions. An apology was the least she deserved. Asia's smile only widened after his response. Eyes blurry with tears of joy, Asia had wrapped her arms around Naruto and laid her face upon his chest. Naruto did nothing to stop her. He merely stood there, holding his crying sister. The questions that lingered in Asia's mind quelled. For all she cared, her brother was back. That was what mattered. Chapter 3. The Rising Tide. The church had never seen it coming. A good number of churches under their command all suffered a fate condemned by their lord. Following a common pattern, none of the churches that had been attacked were left standing. All of them had been burned and the ashes that formed were scattered in the wind. Accounts of such attacks spread far and wide, all of them following a similar pattern as witnesses declaimed what they had seen or heard. Terrified screams, followed by the blood-choked cries and then, silence. As fires were set upon the churches, death lingered in the eerie silence. Lord Dulio, you must not act so carefree. Our churches have been attacked by an unknown enemy. This no time to act so. Dulio Gesualdo, the strongest exorcist to ever grace the ranks of the angel faction, never cared for situations such as these. Lax in nature and compassionate as a fault, Dulio already knew the reason for the attacks. All of the churches guarded an Excalibur fragment. The attacks could simply be brushed off as attempts to obtain all the fragments. But there was a hole in that theory. Another church that had no association with the Holy Sword met the same fate. It did not take long until realization dawned. Dulio now knew the motive and individual whom had ordered the attacks. The feeling of sadness and pain clutching onto his heart, refusing to let go, did not help either. No need to worry, Dulio declared rather lazily. I will handle this myself. Upon his declaration, Dulio began ushering the undesired guests out of the room. Slamming the door behind him, Dulio's slipshod smile dropped. Visage wan with emotional pain, the strongest exorcist walked across his luxurious room and looked out the window. A small, agonizing smile marred his features as Dulio looked off into the distance. Is this your doing, little brother? Is this your message to me for failing to protect Asia? Destruction, pure unmatched destruction, was only visible in the distance. Everything had been annihilated, leaving behind only the eerie silence of loss. Death lingered in the dingy air as dust clouded the heavens, blanketing over the rubble of a once graceful village. No signs of life remained in the ruins. Tendrils of blood stretched far and wide, bodies littered the bloodied ground. The unsavory clash of blades rang clear in the silent ruins, echoing throughout whatever remains of the villages were left. A group of crimson-eyed men surrounded a single woman standing amidst the hostile group. Tied into a ponytail, the woman's unruly blonde hair swayed under the gentle wind. Sword in hand, the woman's regal features remained calm as a slight smile played on her lips. The woman's brutish blue eyes scanned each and every one of the hostile opponents, with little interest escaping the ocean blue orbs. Growling in outrage, the men, no vampires, circled around the woman in hopes of locating an opening for an attack. No matter how uninterested her outer appearance looked, a dragon rested beneath the fragile outlook. Mordred Pendragon was many things, and defenseless was not one of them. As a descendant of the traitorous knight, she had inherited the natural talent of a swordsman from her ancestor. Combating her at close range was suicide. Unless an individual's skill was equal if not greater than an adept swordsman, surviving the clash of blades was nigh impossible. With only a few swordsmen at their disposal, the vampires were at a tight end. If any of them broke off from the circular formation, Mordred would gain an opportunity to escape the encirclement and strike them individually. Filthy human, die! Shifting her attention onto the speaker, Mordred gracefully dodged a slash aimed at her being. Dancing around a number of slashes, Mordred quickly brought her own blade forward and sank it into her attacker's exposed stomach. Yanking the blade free of its target, the Pendragon grunted in annoyance as more and more vampires flooded the field. Swiping for blood, a few vampires chose to engage her in close combat whilst others blasted her with magic bullets. Neither of the attacks nor magical bolts managed to land a hit. Swaying past attack after attack with the agility of a cheetah and the grace of an eagle, Mordred danced past the attacks with relative ease. With strength unexpected from such a petite frame, Mordred swung her mighty two-handed blade, seeping the barren ground with the blood of her enemies. Motivated by the cries of pain, Mordred charged and split a second vampire in half. Forcing her blade past the layers of muscle and bone, Mordred's endeavor ended when her once beautiful silver blade escaped the vampire's body and splattered droplets of blood onto the remaining blood-suckers. From horror to fear, a series of emotions bypassed the enraged masks that her attackers wore, leaving them in a small state of shock. It was all the time she had needed. Rushing forward with her menacing blade in tow, Mordred sheathed her blade into the bodies of stunned vampires, leaving a few others to cry out in surprise. Silencing the remaining vampires and splattering muscles and blood in every direction. Flicking away a string of blood, Mordred sheathed her mighty blade and observed her handiwork with a tiresome gaze. The job had been complete. Wiping out the vampires that had bypassed their territory, Mordred no longer held any obligation to remain in the unsavory forests of Romania. Littering the earth with vampire remains was not exactly her ideal mission, but it was better than staying inside that godforsaken fortress dealing with Semiramis. Well, I can't have you slaughtering the members of my faction now, can I? Turning her head towards the origins of the voice, Mordred narrowed her eyes upon sight of the speaker. Doll-faced and eluding an aura of self-importance, Marius Teeps stood in the shadows with a respectful smile adorning his fragile features. Grabbed in robes fit for a king, Marius gave Mordred a mocking bow as he continued to smile. Masked underneath his pleasantry, Marius continued to study Mordred with a glimmer in his crimson eyes. It was no secret that Marius was not as pleasant as he portrayed himself, far from it. Cruel and manipulative under his smile of friendliness, Marius was never an honest individual. Willing to do whatever the cost in order to benefit himself. Humph, you will be cut down just like your men, Mordred declared, allowing her annoyance to seep into the tone of indifference. If you challenge me, even the pact you have made with the Cow's Brigade will not save you. Quite arrogant of you, Mordred. Marius never finished his sentence, as a soaring blade impaled itself inches away from his head, and sheathed itself into the trunk of a tree. A snarky laughter filled the silent forest, followed by the crunch of stone. Launching herself from the ground, Mordred had shot towards Marius whilst leaving behind an interstice of destroyed earth. Retrieving her blade, Mordred made use of the surprise generated by the sudden throw of her blade. Aiming for Marius's head, Mordred worked hard as her attempts at beheading the vampire increased, with every slash forming a shallow cut on the agile vampire. What are you doing? Oh, I was ordered by Uzumaki to kill all the vampires. You just happened to be one. Unrelenting with her pursuit, Mordred's smile widened upon every cut she dealt to the doll-faced vampire. Kicking him to the ground, Mordred's smile widened when she had foiled his attempt on casting a spell. Simply breaking the caster's concentration would suffice. Instead, Mordred had done a far greater deed. Removing the Marius's arm, a wondrous cry of pain escaped the vampire's lips as he clutched the newly formed stub. Attempts of quelling the raging flames only ended in failure. Mordred continued to watch the display with a brutish smile playing on her lips. We'll be back to collect the Sephiroth Grawl. Next time you get in the way, Uzumaki will kill you. The gathering of clouds just about the Hanging Gardens continued in a leisurely pace, swirling into a single blanket of darkness containing droplets of would-be rain inside. Situated inside his room, Naruto seated himself behind a large desk adorned with wondrous decorations and a single chest set placed before him. Holding onto a night piece, Naruto merely gazed at the darkening sky in contempt. All the pieces were gathering. The time to act would be upon him soon. All plays were in need of an opening act. Slamming the knight onto the board, a glimmer of thought flushing his features. My lord! Storming into the silent room, Diarmuid's worry-filled tone snapped Naruto back to reality. Setting a steady gaze on the ever-so-loyal knight, the blonde beckoned for him to speak with a wave of the hand. There was no need to reprimand Diarmuid, the man knew better. The situation was either dire or important for such an intrusion. Depending on the revelation, forgiveness would vary. Knowing Diarmuid, there would be no need for a punishment. Lady Semiramis and Lady Asia have left the Hanging Gardens, Diarmuid announced whilst performing a bow of his head. To where? Naruto demanded with a slight frown forming onto his calm visage. Ko, my lord. Lady Asia mentioned the need of thanking a friend for helping her. I believe the two are headed there in order to do so. The frown continued to increase as Naruto thought on the words. Semiramis was a wild card, that was for sure. Most of the time unwilling to any of the orders placed upon her, granting Asia's request to visit Ko was an abnormality. He needed to know the reason behind her actions. We are heading to Ko. Walking through the streets of Ko, Semiramis graced passing humans with a charming smile while both her and Asia headed towards Ko Academy. Turning a number of heads, the almost flirtatious smile did little help the men from staring. Appealing in all areas, Semiramis continued to smile with no signs of stopping as she allowed Asia to guide her along. It did not take long until they stood at the gates of Ko Academy. Already have sensed a number of demonic signatures surrounding the school. Devils ran this school. How ironic a nun would come upon it. Issei-san! Asia called out in a mixture of joy and relief. Upon hearing the nun's call, a plain-looking male eluding a minuscule amount of demonic might bounded forward with a cry of his own. Happiness marring his features, Semiramis found the smile albeit disturbing. Ignoring the feelings dancing across her chest, the woman watched on as Asia and the newly named Issei hugged. A spark of interest filled her eyes upon sight of the affectionate gesture. Her interest did not align with the relationship between the devil and Asia, it branched from Naruto and Asia's relationship. The thought of Naruto's reaction was priceless. The woman almost felt bad for the devil. It was no secret Naruto took great care of anything that belonged to him, and a sister whom he clearly showed love for spending time with the devil. How amusing, Issei! Get away from them now! Issei and Asia both were snapped away from the hug as a commanding voice pierced the serene silence. Quickly backing away, Issei turned to the origins of the voice and blinked in surprise. Standing a distance from him with her peerage was Rias Gremory. Crimson locks swaying under the slight breeze, the Gremory heiress stood firm and approached the three with narrowed eyes guiding the way. Semiramis merely smiled one of boredom, signifying the lack of interest involving the Gremory. Issei was simply standing there with confusion spreading across his simple features. Looking from the two attractive girls to Rias, the perverted pawn knew little of the true dangers of interacting with Asia Argento. Why are you here, in Gremory territory, witch? Rias growled with her eyes narrowing dangerously. Humph, if it isn't the spoiled devil, Semiramis muttered with a mocking smile adorning her regal features. Be careful with your words, little girl. I may not be as brutal as my lord, but I will not hesitate to end your meaningless existence either. You are in Gremory territory. I rule this land and not only have you trespassed, but you are threatening an heiress of one of the remaining 72 pillars. I will not stand. Then kneel. The sudden declaration had silencing Rias and brought attention onto the new voice. Entering the fray with a golden magnificence only befitting of a king, Naruto Uzumaki strolled out of shining teleportation circle with arms crossed and a displeased frown adorning his features. Following closely behind, Diarmuid held his two faithful spears and directed them at the group of devils. Looking upon Naruto, Rias and her loyal peerage members knew only of the untamed pressure seated above them. Issei eyed the man with a critical gaze as the boosted gears soon formed on his left arm. Readying himself for an attack, the perverted devil felt the world freeze when he locked eyes with the blonde. It was not anger of a simple man, it was the untamed fury of a lion. Despite the might that eluded the blonde, Rias had quickly snapped out of her stupor. Regaining her bearings, the Gremory heiress stalked forward and placed herself beside Issei and glared at the blonde. Perhaps it was the naivety that had drove her or even the stupid bravery. All she knew was absolute fear when Naruto turned his gaze onto her. All forms of courage escaped Rias as she flinched under the glare. Yet Rias had found solace upon her own words. The humans were at her territory, and attacking the sister of the current Lucifer would be punishable by death. Asia, on the other hand, feared for what Naruto's dislike of devils would bring forth. I am the sister of Sir's Lucifer. I will not stand for the laughter. Mocking laughter escaped Naruto's lips as he outright released his mirth upon the face of the naive devil. Semiramis joined in with a giggle of her own, clearly amused by the sudden declaration as well. Nothing more than the laughter of both hero descendants filled the air with little to combat the mockery. Finishing the laugh, Naruto sent her an arrogant smirk. Well then, mongrel. Your pit, bastard, Issei bellowed as he charged forward with the boosted gear glowing with magical might. Before he could even reach Naruto, Diarmuid sprang into action. Bring his cursed spears forward, the man retaliated with a slash of his spears. Successfully slicing the boosted gear along with his shorter spear, Diarmuid kicked Issei back. Sending the pervert back, Diarmuid readied his demonic spear once again with a frown marring his features. I, Diarmuid Ue Dubni, shall never forgive anyone who attempts to attack my lord. You, devil, prepare yourself. Mine honor will not allow such disrespect towards Lord Naruto. The first issue Issei noticed was not the stinging pain of his newly acquired wound, but the lack of power multiplication from his sacred gear. It had been more than 10 seconds already, and his Longinus had not doubled his power. You have noticed. My demonic spear, Dirge, the crimson rose of exorcism, severs the connection between magical enhancements and its source. Your boosted gear allows you to multiply your strength twice its amount. But with Death's curse, the boosted gear's ability is rendered useless. A horrified expression disfigured Issei and Rias's visages as the two looked at Diarmuid. Such a powerful ability from the spear had neutralized the Longinus in a single strike. The sheer potential with the spear was enough to draw on the greed all devils held from within. Severing the connection between Issei and the Red Dragon Emperor was an admirable feat. It only paved way for more questions to surround the demonic spear. Rias was quick to react, shrouding herself in an aura of demonic red magic, directing a blast towards Diarmuid. Slashing the bolt away, Rias looked upon the spear in shock. Her power of destruction had never failed in vaporizing weapons before. Then a thought of realization struck her. Perhaps it was the curse placed upon the spear that had allowed it to neutralize magical connections. Let's leave our servants to fight, shall we, devil? Naruto mused whilst calling forth the gate of Babylon, showering the space behind him with a sea of weaponry. If you wish to fight so much, then I shall grace you with my presence. Bounding forward, Asia shook off the moments of fear and approached her beloved brother with confidence exploding upon her visage. Placing herself between him and Rias, the blonde nun drew looks of curiosity whilst she stood before her brother with defiance obvious in the actions performed. Semiramis marveled at the girl's willingness to face Naruto. The latter's legendary anger resulted in the deaths of many individuals that had disrespected him. Now, faced with an overly spoiled devil, the witch wondered how she remained alive thus far. Many have died for much less, big brother. Please. They helped me. Asia pleading with desperation in her eyes. Hoping to stop her beloved brother from eradicating her first friend and his master, Naruto remained silent as he held a steady gaze with his sister. Neither willing to back down from their decision, both siblings held the silent battle. Relaxing his shoulders, Naruto snapped his fingers and the golden majesty of halos illuminating the space behind him vanished, leaving no signs of their presence. Eyeing his sister for a minute longer, Naruto beckoned for her to follow as he began to leave the school grounds. Remember this, devil? Asia's benevolence has saved your pitiful lives for this much longer. Next time we cross paths, expect your numbers to be reduced. My tolerance only extends thus far. Pray we do not meet. Completing his words, a flight of doves shrouded the four hero descendants in their welcomed shadows. Vanishing, the four that had once been in the center of the birds too followed the example of the birds, leaving behind only a group of dazed devils. Yet they had not gone through this situation unscathed. Issei had lost the connection between himself and the Red Dragon Emperor. For how long the effects of the curse lasted none of them knew. All that was on Rias's mind was the upcoming raiding game that was to decide her future. Inside the Hanging Gardens, Naruto had returned to his room without a single word to Asia. Residing in the darkened room without much light illuminating it from the incoming darkness, Naruto's piercing blue eyes bored directly into the welcomed shadows. The door leading into his room were forcefully opened as light flicked into existence, slaying the shadows and bringing forth light to quell the arising darkness. Semiramis shuffled to Naruto's side without a care for the glare sent her way. Ignoring the deathly glares had become almost of a habit. Spending so much time with the blonde, the glares of annoyance never really meant much compared to the outrage he had shown at times deemed necessary. Are you not going to offer a lady a seat? Semiramis asked with the ever-so-graceful smile gently stretching her lips. I care little if you sit or stand, Naruto mused as he stared at the chess set. Tell me, have you any news of the fragments I have been asking for? Yes. The so-called Excalibur fragments have all been located by my doves. It has only been a matter of taking them. Prompting her to continue, Naruto already knew a complication had arisen. There had been little times he had been able to operate without an issue coming up with the plan, forcing him to compromise. The churches holding them had already been attacked. I only managed to secure one of the blades left untouched by the chain of attacks. The others have been lost or still remain in the possession of new holy sword wielders. That much I am certain of. What of the stolen ones? Any clue as to who had stolen them from the church before we could? No, though I do have my suspicions. The devils are immediately out of the equal. They possess no members able to wield holy swords without hurting themselves in the process. The fallen angels are more likely, possessing quite the intricate network of spies. They are some of the more likely candidates. Unlike the devils, they can wield holy swords without pain in return. Other factions are questionable as well, though many care little for other factions, so it is less likely than the fallen angels. Very well then, I want the blades found. Semiramis merely smiled in response, finding comfort in the soft cushion she sat on. With the conversation dying down, the witch decided to have her fun. Leaning forward, Semiramis eliminated the distance between their faces to a paltry number of inches. Even though they were inches apart, Naruto kept his calm demeanor. His reaction was not the one Semiramis was looking for as she leaned forward, cutting the distance between themselves even further. Stopping her attempts to fluster him, Naruto pushed her back and flicked her forehead in retaliation. Rubbing her forehead in annoyance, Semiramis left in a huff. "Pesky woman," Naruto muttered with hints of amusement laced into his voice. As she left, Naruto returned his attention to the chess set. Lips twitched upwards, the neutral gaze he had wore was shattered by the ghost of a smile. Undeniably so, the smallest hints of a smile played on his lips. Though he would not admit it, the Uzumaki found her attempts quite amusing. Refusing to give her the satisfaction of victory, Naruto was adamant on winning the little challenge Semiramis had issued. Chapter 4: Pieces of a Puzzle. Inside the busy kitchens of the Hanging Gardens, Asia gingerly stirred the heated pot placed before her. A serene smile had snaked its way onto her countenance. Watching her purposefully work, a number of workers had eyed her with curiosity rolling off of them in waves. Here she was, Asia Argento, the supposed guest of one of the faction's founding members, Naruto Uzumaki, working tirelessly on a dish. The look of determination that had taken residence upon her face had been enough to quell all offers of assistance. The situation had lasted for no longer than a few minutes before the blonde girl had vanished into the background. Returning to their work of preparing meals for the hungry heroes, the kitchen was soon buzzing with activity once again. An hour had ended with a cheer of joy escaping Asia as her smile exploded into existence. Resting on the counter was a steaming bowl of broth and noodles, glistening under the dim lighting. The bright smile that had encased her very being continued to brighten as seconds ticked by and anticipation guided her actions. Gently placing the noodles onto a tray, careful not to spill the contents, Asia happily grabbed hold of the tray and began making her way out of the kitchen. Navigating through a maze of hallways and a sea of occupants, Asia headed straight for the quarters. It was not long until she had found herself staring at the door leading into her brother's room. Knocking in an enlivened fashion, Asia waited patiently for an answer. Her smile never dimmed. Minutes passed without an answer from the other side. Making up her mind, Asia tested the door and found it unlocked. Venturing inside with the meal in hand, the young nun found herself inside a well-kept room adorned with a number of decorations. Taking in everything, Asia placed the cooked ramen on the desk and looked around once again. Big brother must be out training again, Asia thought. As her eyes scanned the room, a slightly open desk drawer caught her attention. Uncertainty washed over her as a small debate between her curiosity and manners ignited. Finally, in what seemed like hour-long minutes, Asia had decided to take a look inside to satisfy the growing curiosity. Quickly positioning herself on the desk's other side, the blonde nun pulled the slightly open drawer, allowing herself to gaze at the contents stored inside. Even though the drawer contained a number of interesting objects, Asia's gaze fell directly onto the picture frame resting face down inside. Grabbing hold of the frame, a spark of recognition filled her eyes. Compared to the luxuries her brother boasted, the simple frame decorated in a childish manner was pathetic compared to the other riches he possessed. The frame was orange in color and had small yellow stars plastered along the edges, giving it a homemade feeling. Upon seeing the picture frame, Asia's eyes sparkled in joy. During their time spent in the church as orphans, the two siblings only had one another. Celebrating holidays and birthdays had brought forth a lackluster of handmade gifts incomparable to the possessions professionally made. The picture frame was one of the many prosaic gifts Asia had given to her dear brother. Seeing how the gift remained relatively the same since she had given it to him, her smile grew in size. Asia knew her brother loved her, there was little doubt. But after his disappearance, a small hinge of uncertainty had spiked in her heart. That uncertainty still remained. Compared to their worry-less childhood, Naruto had been far more distant as of late. Doubts revolving around her brother's feelings towards herself had all been vanquished upon sight of the frame. In comparison to other gifts that had seemed grandeur, that simple frame she had given was frankly dull. Yet here it was, still in his possession. How much her brother treasured the gift had warmed Asia's heart greatly. Gazing at the picture safely tucked inside the frame, memories of the past flooded her mind. The aging picture was taken years ago, with both her and Naruto standing in front of Dulio. Asia remembered that day. It had been her birthday. Dulio had been kind enough to take them out to enjoy a fare. Those were simpler times. Just the three of them together. How much she yearned to see those days again. Naruto, how have you been, little brother? Naruto, who had been tiring himself out in his ever so painful training regime, jumped upon hearing the all too familiar voice. Turning to face the originator of the voice, Naruto bit back the indescribable emotions that erupted inside his heart. Standing there with a gentle smile drawn upon his lax features was Dulio himself. Grabbed in the traditional robes of an exorcist, Dulio continued to smile, masking his nervousness that had forcefully invaded his heart. Both joy and anger marred Naruto's features as his fists clenched upon the sword he held. How Dulio had managed to find him was an immense breach in security. What are you doing here, Dulio? Naruto finally asked with his emotions kept at bay. For 2 reasons, Dulio responded as he calmly walked through the maze of weaponry, to apologize for my inability to protect Asia, and to ask you to stop pursuing your foolish goal. Leave Trihexa alone, the beast cannot be slain without the powers of both Great Red and Ophis. Facing it is comparable to scaling a never-ending mountain. Anger flared to life as Naruto attempted to rein in his emotions. The attempts were vain, the explosion of both anger and frustration had come in the form of words. Then I will find another way. Weren't you the one who taught me hard work and determination could accomplish any goal? The Uzumakis, my family, have been hunted down for centuries. With our blood being the only key to awaken Trihexa, we are the targets of both good and evil. Those that wish to force Trihexa to sleep forever, and those who wish to awaken it. I have to kill it, even if I die. Without Trihexa, the Uzumakis no longer have to suffer. Dulio flinched at the words, using his own teachings against him. Even so, it did not stop his own frustration from expressing his view on the situation. Then what about Asia? If you die, then what about her? I can't just let you throw your life away. We have been through far too much. Think about her, would you? How would she feel if you died? I am thinking about her. Naruto bellowed. The blade he held on to shivered under his intense grip as the clash of ideals between brothers began. Asia's life was entrusted to me. For the future of the clan, for her future, I have to kill Trihexa. She already suffered enough being an Uzumaki. Dulio stamped both his feet in frustration and anger. What Naruto said was true. The Uzumakis had been hunted down to near extinction for uncontrollable reasons. Possessing Uzumaki blood already painted a target on one's back. The mindset of many wished for the death of all who possessed Uzumaki blood, be it a child or an adult. If no Uzumakis walked the earth, then the blood seals placed upon Trihexa would forever remain in place, giving no chance for people who wished to awaken it a chance to do so. That was how Dulio had found the two. He could still remember it. Coming off as an exorcist in training, Dulio had found the 2 siblings huddling inside a ruined fireplace. Their village had been wiped out, family, friends, elders, neighbors, all gone. That was when he had taken them in. After all, fellow orphans had to stick together, right? My lord, I will be taking my leave. Dulio stole a glance at the approaching figure and relented with a sigh. Giving Naruto one more look, the exorcist retreated into the woods, feeling much worse than he had felt before the talk. The attempt in talking Naruto out of his outrageous plan was for naught. Opportunities would still arise. If they did not, he would make opportunities. For now, he would leave. A fight was unnecessary between the two. Naruto acknowledged the haunting words with a nod. The explosion of anger had left him emotionally taxed. Yelling at Dulio, someone he had looked up to for as long as he could remember, was not a pleasant experience. Sure, the two had tussled, what friends didn't? No, this was different. It was the idea of fighting Dulio that had been the real pain. To bring himself to fight his friend, the one who had taken him in and taught him of the world. Yet, none of it had affected his determination. In fact, it had only strengthened it. Rise of him was in a joyous mood. How could he not be? With all his plans and schemes falling into place, there left plenty of room for pleasure. With a sickening smile twisting his pale features, and a glass of blood-red wine situated in a hand, the son of Lucifer sat upon an extravagant throne. Inside the lavish room, the throne like all others was built to draw attention towards it. Decorated with gold and other forms of precious materials, it could only be described as grand. For decorative purposes rather than necessity, imposing stone pillars stood dignity like sentinels. Beside him with a tray on which a bottle of wine sat, Euclid stood firmly beside his lord with his unmatched emotion-free expression. Filling the room with sickening laughter, Rise of him conveyed his happiness through a lengthy laugh. My lord, is it not best to dispose of the bodies? Euclid asked. Oh, don't worry so much, Euclid. Worry is bad for the skin. Rise of him cheerfully responded with a wave of the hand. Have Marius handle it. Enjoy yourself, Euclid. My plans are almost complete. Euclid relented and returned to his former action. unwillingly spread across the grand floor. Bodies of various vampires littered the polished ground, oozing out profound amounts of blood. Killed in unimaginable ways, the bodies were left there by an ever so cheerful Rizavim as he enjoyed the pleasantries offered by wine. Inside Teep's castle, a ritual was currently in the works. Valerie Teeps, the current wielder of the Sephiroth Grawl, to make contact with the principle of life, in order to proceed with his plan, to awaken Trihexa, the dead needed to be brought back to life. The necessary conditions had to be met. To awaken the apocalyptic beast, it was comparable to waging war against the world. He was in need of a force to complete an ambition he had worked tirelessly on. Euclid, is the Sephiroth Grawl ready? No, my lord. Marius is still working on the extraction, Rizavim responded with a nod of his head. Nothing could ruin the joyous mood now. Everything was going according to plan. All he desired now was the blood of an Uzumaki. That could easily be acquired. He simply needed to slaughter a few more humans, get the last Uzumaki's attention, and then kidnap him, easily. Though the only issue would be the hero faction that he currently headed. Though Cao Cao officially ruled over the hero faction, it was no secret Naruto Uzumaki held a massive amount of influence over the faction. With a large number of supporters backing him, a struggle for power between the two would soon come to life. If he played his cards right, Rizavim could secure the help of Cao Cao and the Uzumaki. Euclid, I need you to meet up with our friend, Cao Cao from the hero faction, Rizavim cheerfully ordered as he drained his glass of wine with a withering smile. Give him the information I have given you. Then let him go and play with the Uzumaki. At once, my lord. Euclid inclined his head and bowed. Forming a teleportation circle with a flick of his wrist, Euclid proceeded forward and left Rizavim to enjoy his wine. Mordred grunted in annoyance as she walked the halls of the Hanging Garden with a scowl marrying her features. Undeniably angry with an issue best left alone, the descendant of the traitorous knight stomped through the halls, drawing attention from other occupants. As she did so, drawing forth a growl of anger, Mordred sent withering glare at Semiramis, who only stood at the hallway's end with a smirk adorning her features. The anger that had been residing in her heart exploded into activity upon the sight of Semiramis. The witch always managed to make her blood boil, even with a simple smile. Oh, Mordred, how nice of you to arrive tardy again, Semiramis tooted with her smile widening when she caught sight of the anger influencing Mordred's actions. Naruto is going to be very pleased. Just lead the way. Witch. Mordred growled. Semiramis huffed at the epithet. While originally orchestrated by Naruto, she never really took a liking to the displeasing name. Preferring something more beautiful in comparison to her unsavory nickname, Semiramis never lived down the name as others continuously reminded her of the unlikable name. Though the usage of the name only came from either Naruto or Mordred, having someone such as the descendant of the traitorous knight use the name only angered her. Perhaps it was the annoyance for the woman she had grown during their time together, or perhaps she simply desired to tease the young woman out of boredom. Proceeding forward, an illusionary wall that had sat at the hall's end shimmered out of existence, allowing both women to bypass the reassurance. Placed behind the illusionary wall was a door, leading into a room built specifically for meetings best left in secret. Beckoning for her to follow, Semiramis ushered Mordred inside the room and cast a swift illusion with a flick of the wrist. There was no need for anyone to find out about the events of this meeting. Information exchanged in these secretive gatherings was not for everyone. Killing someone for hearing anything would be a shame. Inside the dimly lit room, Naruto sat at the far end with Diarmuid situated beside him with a stern expression set in stone. Among the gathered members, Avrin, a tall man garbed in full body suit along with a blue mantle, a featureless golden mask shrouded his face, preventing anyone from looking upon his face, was present. An immediate reaction came from Mordred, with a raised brow, seated herself far away from Semiramis, and turned her confusion onto the other members. Meetings such as these were filled with more than 5 members, thus leading to the birth of a question. The other members are away, Naruto said as he answered the unasked question. Citing the odd look sent by Mordred, Naruto held back a snort of amusement, while scanning the gathered members before nodding his head in acceptance. Now, since everyone is here, let us begin. Confirmation of consent by the various members were in various forms. A simple nod from Avrin, a flirtatious smirk by Semiramis, and lastly, a grunt from Mordred. A final glance was sent to every member before Naruto relaxed in his seat, in preparation for the meeting ahead. Motioning from Semiramis to begin, the witch merely smiled before gathering the attention onto herself with a cough. My doves have learned of a meeting between Cao Cao and a devil, Semiramis began. Glancing at the neutral expression sent her way, the witch continued, though I was unable to listen in on the entire conversation, I have more than enough information to conclude their actions. The devil had a proposition from his master. A mention of cleansing the hero faction was said by Cao Cao. TCH, That bastard! Mordred snarled with distaste, lacing her voice. We can't just sit here. If he wants a fight, then we give him one, as expected from a brute such as yourself. Waving that sword of yours without any thought, you damned witch! Shaking his head with a sigh escaping his lips, Naruto watched on as the two battled it in a fight of words. With snide remarks from Semiramis, and cheap insults dealt by Mordred, it was beginning to look like every other verbal spat the two participated in. Beckoning for Diarmuid to break up the fight, Naruto entangled his fingers and leaned forward onto the table in an attempt to hide the amused smile playing along his lips. Once Diarmuid had regained control in the room, Naruto forced his smile to die down before he garnered every occupant's attention. As you can see, Cao Cao has aligned himself with the devils. There is no escaping the fight Cao Cao is preparing for. That is why I asked you all here. I want to push our plans ahead of schedule if possible, Naruto said, allowing the words to sink in before continuing. Avesprun, I need to know how many golems you have created. Avesprun, the member who had remained silent the entire time, acknowledged the question with a nod before speaking in a voice filled with neutrality. The Gogmagogs you asked me to reproduce have been delayed. I am currently studying their magic enchantments made by the ancient gods. Though the progress is slow, the other golems have been coming along quickly. I managed to reproduce 400 of them so far. A pleased smile crossed Naruto's as a nod of both gratitude and acceptance was sent towards Avesprun. Accepting the talented magician into his ranks had been a very beneficial decision. Avesprun, the descendant of Solomon ibn Gabirol, had inherited not only his ancestor's Latinist name, but his work as well. Studying the vast amount of knowledge his ancestor had managed to accumulate, Avesprun had been keen on continuing the research of Solomon. The ultimate goal in creating the golem of all golems had been left incomplete, and thus Avesprun worked tirelessly in order to complete the ultimate golem. Finding work under Naruto had been an opportunity that had been beneficial to both parties. While Naruto provided him resources and protection, Avesprun in return provided Naruto a vast number of destructive golems. Semiramis, what about the fragments? I found them. The fragments had been stolen by a rogue exorcist by the name of Fried Selzen who now works under the priest Valpergaliai. The only fragments left are wielded by two church exorcists, Zenobia Quarta and Irina Shidu. None of them pose a real threat to our members. Good, I want them found. And lastly, Mordred. Is the Sephiroth Grawl ready for extraction? Yes, but that bastard Marius made another deal with the devil. They are probably extracting the sacred gear at this point. Mordred scowled with displeasure, marrying her features. Teep's castle is under heavy fortification and is filled with vampires. It's going to be hard to get the Sephiroth Grawl, Uzumaki. Naruto frowned at those words before a look of realization crossed his features, bringing forth a smile. Turning to Mordred, who looked pained with her bruised ego, Naruto's mind was already racing. Marius had never been reliable. Denying them the Sephiroth Grawl was an obvious declaration of war. Then stormed the castle, Naruto declared, drawing raised eyebrows from every member, since Avesprun has been so kind to provide us with a small army of golems. We will use it to regain what was promised to us. I want you to take 20 golems with you to sack Teep's castle. Directing the order at Mordred, Naruto watched as a sinister smile arose from the ashes of the scowl. The prospect of gaining revenge on Marius was enough to draw her in. To sack an entire castle, that was an opportunity that was scarce in a lifetime. Accepting the orders wholeheartedly, Mordred pondered on the possible outcomes with the smile still in place. That smile she wore only felt when Naruto's next sentence became audible. Semiramis, I want you to assist her. If they have not finished extracting the sacred gear, do not let them. I can handle this alone, Uzumaki. I don't need help from the witch. Mordred scowled with anger burning into existence. My decision is final. The two of you will work together. Mordred growled in defeat as she saw the determined gaze sent her way. When it came to decisions, Naruto remained stubborn as a mule. Unwilling to back down in some of the worst situations, the descendant of the traitorous knight honestly could say arguing was useless. Semiramis took the orders with a smile, though the smile held traces of annoyance. Mordred and Semiramis working together was going to be a sight. If they were able to work together, a dangerous combination they would become, that is if they did not kill each other before attacking Teep's castle. Naruto had finished the meeting with relative ease after the orders had been issued. Though a few amusing spats between the two females had ignited, nothing of importance had been dabbled on. Heading for his room with intentions of rest, Naruto had found company along his path. Asia, who had been in a hurry to reach Naruto's room, cursed her luck with a mouth unsuspected of a nun. Having run into Naruto during her dash for the other blonde's room was an ending to her attempt in recovering the now ruined ramen. Unable to predict his return, Asia had left the ramen there for the blonde to eat when he had returned. With no signs of his return, Asia had realized the dish she had created was now ruined. Asia, what are you doing here? Naruto asked with a raised brow. I wanted to spend more time with you, big brother. Asia shouted through a rush of thoughts. It only took a second before realization dawned upon the nun. Clasping her hands over her mouth, Asia froze with her blue eyes enlarged in shock. The random thought had been sudden and desperate, though it held some form of truth. Naruto eyed his sister closely before a sad smile twisted into existence. Accepting her brash answer with a second smile, Naruto guided her forward as the words Delio had spoken returned. Focusing on the statement made by the strongest exorcist, Naruto had completely encased himself around the possibilities if his plans were to be fulfilled. Big brother. Are you okay? Oh, I'm fine, Asia. Shaking away the thoughts, Naruto entered the room not before giving his sister a confused look. A small yelp that had escaped Asia was quickly smothered by the raging blush that turned her face tomato red. Smiling further, Naruto entered the room without anything to stop him. Upon his entry, Naruto had immediately spotted the tray and bowl resting against his desk. Perplexed by the appearance of the bowl, the blonde's eyes focused on the soggy noodles lazily swimming around the gentle broth. Asia, who had been watching the entire reaction, winced at the lack of words. Shuffling nervously, the young nun played with her fingers in an attempt to quell the nervousness that had invaded her mind. Big brother. Why you don't have to eat that? I just made that and I. Asia's sentence forever remained unfinished as her eyes widened in shock. Naruto, who had been staring at the noodles with a questionable glance, had seated himself and began dining on the ruined dish. Reining in her surprise and hurriedly moving to his side, Asia attempted to stop her brother from consuming the dish with no form of success. Big brother, you don't have to eat that. You cooked this for me, right? Naruto asked after downing another mouthful of brother and soggy noodles. Receiving a nod in response, Naruto merely snorted before continuing the meal. If my sister made me a meal, then I won't let it go to waste. After his declaration, Naruto returned to his meal, leaving Asia there to watch. A surge of warmth filled Asia's heart as she watched her brother dine. Yet the feelings did not stop there. Nostalgia soon came into existence. Seeing her brother eat an unsavory meal that she had created reminded the blonde nun so much of the past. A smile full of warmth and joy crossed her visage. Asia could not help herself. The gap that had been erected between the two was finally being broken down. The hope of reigniting their relationship as children had only grown stronger. As for Naruto, his own determination had exploded. The simple gesture of cooking his favorite meal had been enough to erase all traces of doubt. Then and there, the two promises that had driven him in life repeated themselves like a mantra, fueling his determination. He would slay Trihexa. He would protect Asia. Chapter 5, Painted in Blood. Teep's castle was under lockdown. Shrouded in the light of dawn, a small army of vampires stood in the courtyard, armed and ready for the battle. Garbed in differing sets of armors, nervousness could easily be depicted from their twisted visages. Marius stood before them, dressed in a set of golden armor that sparkled under dawn's first set of rays. Aside from the nervousness that had overtaken them, the army of vampires with Marius at its head remained unmoving inside the stone walls. Sentries were placed atop the walls, overlooking the open space outside the castle. With no reports of approaching invaders, Marius still refused to dismiss the soldiers. The fear of the enemy attacking after he dismissed the soldiers plagued his mind. Just outside the stone walls was an army of massive golems. Large and imposing, along with bodies made of bronze and stone, the gleaming red eyes remain in the shadows provided by the surrounding trees. Lord Marius, there is no sight of the enemy, a scout said with fatigue marring his face. It is safe to allow the army to rest, me lord. There is no need to tire out our troops before the siege. Silence! Marius hissed, sending a sharp blow to the scout's cheek. You're a soldier. Thinking is not something a soldier does. Get back to your position before I punish you for disrespecting me. Bowing his head, the scout hurried away from Marius while nursing his wound with anger flashing in his eyes. Among the gathered vampires, anger was a popular emotion towards Marius, only second to resentment obvious in their tired eyes. 10 hours the soldiers had been standing there. 10 hours in the uncomfortable armors issued by Marius. 10 hours of pure agony. Exposed to the elements, the armor that all soldiers were splattered with raindrops. Hunger and thirst came hand in hand. Ever since their formation inside the courtyard, there was little water or food distributed to the soldiers. Unwilling to lose a single body, Marius continued to drive his men like animals, refusing them the necessities that any living being would need in order to survive. Delusional with fear, Marius knew little of the horrors awaiting him. Uzumaki! What are you doing here? Maudred growled with annoyance obvious in her tone. You said I was to take the castle. I am here for the Sephiroth Grawl, Naruto grunted, I will let you have your fun with the vampires while Semiramis and I will look for the Longinus. Fine. But I get to kill Marius. If he does not have the Longinus, then he could be your plaything for all I care. Inside the woods outside of Teep's castle, a small brigade of golems stood lifelessly. A small camp had been erected by the two female members of the faction. While Mordred discussed with Naruto in a clearing, Semiramis happily remained at the campsite. Situated at the campfire, Semiramis held a devious smile while she mixed whatever ingredients held inside a pot. An intoxicating aroma swirled around the pot, signifying its completion. Even at a distance, both Naruto and Mordred could smell the aroma. Two possibilities came forth from the smell: either Semiramis was cooking lunch, or the witch was working on another form of poison. Though Naruto had already assumed the latter, being wrong on such an occasion could be pleasant. Trekking back towards the campsite, both hero descendants shared no more words, allowing the seductive smell to guide them. "Ah, you two are back," Semiramis mused while the smile she wore never left her. "Good, I believe we can begin the operation." Mordred grunted in response before walking to the pot that Semiramis had left to the flames. Taking a look at the darkened liquid inside, Mordred shrugged her shoulders and reached for a ladle which rested against a rock. Dipping it into the supposed soup, Mordred brought it closer for a smell. Accepting the substance's rich smell, Mordred brought the ladle closer to her lips with the intent of drinking the soup. Naruto, who had been studying the layout of the castle, eyed the soup before he cleared his throat, catching his fellow blonde's attention. "Mordred, that's poison," Naruto said in a rather nonchalant manner. "Semiramis would never cook anything aside from poison. You should know this by now." Dumping the ladle and poison back into the pot, Mordred's eyes widened with anger bursting from her cool blue orbs. Turning to face the mistress of poison, Mordred sent her an anger-driven glare that could have killed. Semiramis, who had been watching the entire exchange, for the most part, held an innocent facade. Any man easily tempted by beauty would have fallen for it. Neither of the blondes acknowledged the innocence as anything but false. Naruto merely continued his study of the castle while Mordred had other intentions. Stomping towards the witch, Mordred tore her blade from its sheath, fully intending to behead Semiramis. "You bitch! You were going to let me drink the poison, weren't you?" Mordred growled with her sword inches away from the witch's neck. "Oh heavens no, it was my mistake. I must have been too busy to have noticed you attempting to drink the poison. Oh, my apologies, this will never happen again," Semiramis called out, with sarcasm leaking from her voice. The response only managed to anger Mordred further. Before the woman could enter a death match, Naruto interrupted their spat. He was sure Semiramis wouldn't have killed Mordred. Or he was sure, at the moment, not so much. Enough. Save the fighting for the vampires. Grumbling in protest, Mordred sheathed her blade and stomped away from Semiramis. Though Naruto's words had acclaimed the issue was over, Mordred did not have the same feelings as her fellow blonde. She would have her revenge in one way or another. For now, she would play down her emotions. Marius came first. That bastard was worse than Semiramis. To some degree, Diarmuid was a man of honor. When taken in by his lord, he had sworn an oath. An oath that would bind him even in death. An oath to forever stand by his lord's side no matter the time, no matter the place. Having been ordered to remain in the Hanging Gardens was rather unpleasant for his part. While he accepted the orders without hesitation, a small wedge of displeasure had taken residence in his heart. There was no doubt Naruto could take care of himself. Saying he was defenseless was a far cry from the truth. It had felt as if he was indirectly breaking his oath, or perhaps it was the prospect of his lord fighting an unknown enemy that had brought forth such emotions. None of that mattered now. Left with an order from the man he had sworn his life to, Diarmuid now focused his mind all on that single task. Guarding Asia, no matter the costs, keep her safe. With tension between Naruto and Cao Cao growing by the day, it was obvious both sides were willing to clash at any time. For now, Naruto has prioritized Asia's safety overall. "Lady Asia, it is I," Diarmuid announced as he gave a gentle knock on the wooden door. "May I come in?" Receiving a yes in response, Diarmuid pushed the wooden door open and entered with a tray of food in hand. Naruto had insisted the former nun be moved to his room while he was away, thus leaving Asia under the care of both Diarmuid and Avisprin. If Cao Cao ever decided to flirt with death and have one of his subordinates capture Asia, he'd have to get through an army of golems and Diarmuid to ever lay a hand on Asia. With that, Naruto had left to personally retrieve the Longinus, leaving Diarmuid behind to act as a bodyguard, a task he had grown accustomed to. "Lady Asia, I have brought breakfast as you have requested," Diarmuid said, carrying the tray towards the table where Asia sat behind. "Is there anything I can help you with?" Asia, who had been seated behind her brother's desk, merely gave Diarmuid a smile before a thoughtful expression crossed her face. Debating whether or not to ask the question she had failed to do with the other members of her brother's faction, Asia continued to ponder on the action, while Diarmuid waited patiently. Not a minute longer, Asia had worked up courage to ask the stoic knight her question in mind. Mr. Diarmuid. See, can you tell me about Miss Semiramis and Big Brother's relationship? Years of training had managed to force the surprise out of his face and kept it under wraps. The question had been an unexpected one to say the least. Rarely did questions involving Naruto ever tie with Semiramis, though the question itself brought on a question of his own. Sure, Asia was different from others, but it did not stop Diarmuid to wonder why. Glancing at the other Uzumaki, Diarmuid racked his thoughts for an acceptable answer before responding to the question. Such questions were foreign to him, especially when it involved his lord. Hardly did one ever ask about the blonde's relations with others. Most questions involved combat abilities and such, never about relationships. Lord Naruto's relationship with Lady Semiramis is one I am uncertain of. Why do you ask, Lady Asia? Diarmuid said with his own curiosity, pushing forward the last portion of words. Oh, I asked Miss Semiramis about Big Brother, and she mentioned they had a special relationship. Diarmuid blinked at Asia's words as he thought of them with a critical mind. What Semiramis had told Asia was not far from the truth. How else would you describe the relationship between an assassin and her boss? Though Diarmuid could come up with a number of ways of describing the relationship, knowing Semiramis, the mistress of poison, only wanted to agitate Naruto when Asia came to ask him about the special relationship. No one really knew about the inner workings of Semiramis's mind. The woman was far too random for anyone to predict. After all, the woman had been very willing to poison her family without a thought of remorse nor any signs of hesitation. Lady Asia, what else did Lady Semiramis tell you about the Lord? Nothing much. She just said Big Brother is interesting. Giving Asian a nod of thanks, Diarmuid bowed his head and left the room before the nun could continue the conversation. Even after the years, the uncertainty around Semiramis's loyalty still remained. The woman was far too unpredictable for one to plan against. Formerly a member loyal to Cao Cao, Diarmuid worried about what the woman was planning. Among every member working for Naruto, Diarmuid worried about Semiramis the most. A woman who had an intricate web of spies in the form of her doves, she was also unmatched in the use of poison. Having no shame in her actions nor clear remorse, Diarmuid had been expecting the descendant of the wise queen of Assyria to poison Naruto sooner or later. His distrust stemmed from the woman's tendency to act behind the backs of everyone. It did not help that Naruto even admitted to the possibilities of the doubts either. Even so, Diarmuid could never understand why Naruto trusted Semiramis so much. Acknowledging the possibilities of her being a traitor and not acting on the knowledge was one of the many questionable acts Naruto had performed in his time. Leaving the room behind, Diarmuid had positioned himself out of the room with both of his demonic spears in hand and a stern expression in place. Vanquishing his thoughts in favor of his duty, Diarmuid's eyes narrowed when they caught sight of Siegfried walking down the empty halls with a smile shining brilliantly upon his visage. A happy Siegfried was an unwelcoming sight. There was little that could bring out a full-blown smile from the descendant of Siegfried, and a fight was among the small list of occasions. Tightening his grip on both weapons, Diarmuid sent Siegfried a glare. Receiving nothing more than a growing smile in response, Diarmuid shifted his body to face the other hero descendant. Mimicking Diarmuid's actions, Siegfried unsheathed his own weapons. Gram, the strongest demon's sword, now resided on Siegfried's right hand. Siegfried, what are you doing here? Diarmuid asked while he busied himself with studying his opponent. Cao Cao wanted to push forward with his plans. I'm here to tie up some loose ends, Siegfried said with a smile now threatening to split his own face. You know how long I've been waiting for this? Diarmuid remained silent as he readied himself for a fight. Whatever Cao Cao had been planning, Asia was going to be dragged in the middle of it. From what Siegfried had said, Cao Cao was adamant on having him killed. Sending one of the most suicidal fighters amongst his ranks was an obvious sign of that. Siegfried cared little for his own life. Utilizing abilities that shortened his lifespan, the man was adamant on enjoying himself in the midst of a life-threatening fight. This was a fight he could not afford to lose. Even if it took his life, he would not allow Siegfried to win this fight. Very well then, shall we begin? Next place you have here, Avisprin, who stood upon a podium inside his dimly lit laboratory, stopped working when he heard those words. Gently placing the tools he held onto a tray where others rested, Avisprin stared at the origins of the words with his expression hidden by the featureless mask. Standing at the entrance of his once secret laboratory graciously provided by Naruto, was Jean. Rapier in hand, the descendant of Joan of Arc smiled cheerfully, displaying no signs of worry over the small army of golems standing behind Avisprin. What are you doing here? Avicabron finally asked after studying Jean for a minute longer. He cared little for how she had found the laboratory. His only concern was why she was in the laboratory. Chow Chow wanted me to take care of you, Avi, Jean cheerfully replied with a graceful smile adorning her delicate features, so, here I am. No further questions were needed. Jean had been quite honest in her intentions, thus leaving him no choice but to fight. Raising a hand, Avesprin took control of his golems and motioned for them towards the blonde girl that had been casually sitting on a counter. The rumble of movement soon filled the air. 10 golems circled around the girl, slicing all paths of escape as their bronze-infused limbs lifted to strike. Jean remained still with her smile still in place, still without worry. We don't have to fight, you know. Avesprin eyed the girl strangely as Jean remained seated with a group of golems ready to pummel her. Her sudden declaration had been enough to stop the assault. It would have been a lie if Avesprin said he was not interested. All he cared about was for the completion of the golem his ancestor failed to finish. Though his perplexed expression was only known to himself, Jean decided to continue while she had his attention. Chow Chow doesn't want to fight you. If you were to stay out of the fighting, then Chow Chow won't have me attack you, Jean said, or you could even join us. With Naruto and Semiramis both gone, the hero faction is in need of members. If you were to join us, Chow Chow would provide you with everything you need. And more. Think about this, Avi. Avesprin gave off the impression of thought over the offer, yet no response came. Jean waited patiently in the circle of golems, as she eyed the mask-wearing man with a calculative gaze. Chow Chow had ordered her to convince Avesprin to join the true hero faction, as he had called it. If Avesprin was unwilling, the offer of neutrality was up for grabs. Even if the offer of membership was declined, having Avesprin out of the way eliminated the threat of an opposing magician as well as an army of magically enhanced golems. It seems I would have to decline, Lady Jean. Oh, how sad, Avi. Then it seems you would have to. You seem to have misunderstood me, Lady Jean. I am declining both membership and neutrality. Working under Lord Naruto gives me the opportunity to work on the unfinished project left behind by my ancestors, as well as the opportunity to test out the mobility of my creations. Before Jean could even question the words, all golems surrounding her bustled forward with their limbs raised and orders set in stone. What was the worst 3 humans could do to a castle defended by a small army of vampires? After all, humans were both physically and magically weaker than the latter. With disadvantages plaguing their very beings, one could not blame the confidence that the vampires held, no matter how misplaced the confidence was. Meaning Teep's castle, a once lavish construct that had rivaled the greatest of Romanian castles, had aged poorly. Damaged by the unstoppable force of time, Marius, who had indirectly taken rule of both faction and clan, neglected the castle, thus leaving it unsuitable to fight off an invasion. Even so, not a single vampire could say their chances were slim. The vampires had a force of 1,000, faced with an enemy of 2 humans with 20 golems was hardly a challenge. Though they faced such feeble numbers, Marius had been unwilling to take the chance. The stubborn action had a negative result on Marius's chances of surviving the attack. Not only had he turned his own men against him, but the unwillingness to allow his men any form of rest from the strenuous task of patrol had left them weak and bitter. A worrisome combination when a battle was in the future. Diminishing both loyalty and morale in one costly mistake, the hero faction had been willing to wait them out. Yet Naruto had declined the game of patience. In the history of attacks, all forms had relied on the element of surprise to guard them against the early attacks defenders would hurl upon them. If one soldier managed to scale the walls, then one could claim the siege was a success. For this one in particular, the art of magic was a hindrance for attackers. With abilities that could topple armies, magic gave way for a new branch of warfare. The Teeps faction had it easy. With walls that kept them safe, Naruto had planned to utilize the very thing that the vampires relied on for this attack. With Semiramis brewing a poison that humans would classify as inhumane, both Mordred and Naruto praised the witch for her talents, though the former did so without uttering a word. Poison was a wonderful tool to utilize. A weapon able to wipe out thousands in a matter of seconds, no matter how others were. Semiramis outranked many in the matter of creating such substances. Before they stormed the walls, some poison would be deposited over the Teeps castle walls. Are you ready? Semiramis merely smiled at the question. The black doves that rested in the entanglement of branches stared blankly at Naruto, who had been speaking with Semiramis. At the outskirts of the forest, Mordred stood gently beside the small pack of lifeless golems with her blade shining under dawn's first rays. The plan was simple. An attack at the break of dawn. The exhausted sentries from the night shift would be careless at the sight of the sun. That was when they would strike. Now, all there was to do was wait. Now, my darlings, fly! Semiramis commanded with a finger on the Teep's castle. Cawing at her words, the doves shot off of the branches and filled the air. Swarming together, the thicket of black feathers soon hovered over Teep's castle, casting darkness on the vampires. Shouts were silenced by the synchronized cries of the doves. Shimmering into existence under the forest's cool shadows, a golden and emerald ark emerged from the gate of Babylon. Naruto, who had already placed himself on the high-tech ark, turned to face Semiramis and offered her a hand. Accepting the gesture with a smile, Semiramis climbed onto the golden ship and made her way towards the throne that sat at the ark's very end. Vimana, the ancient ship that held destructive capabilities that modern ships were unable to recreate. With abilities ranging from flight to the deployment of ancient nuclear warheads, the ship truly put modern-day creations to shame. Armed with an arrangement of ancient machine guns, along with stealth features and biological weapons, Vimana was one of the more destructive objects stored in the gates of Babylon. "Let's go," Naruto said as he took his place at the pilot throne. "Once we deploy the poison, Mordred will commence with the attack and we will find the Sephiroth Grawl." Semiramis nodded her head in response as she stood at Vimana's center. Vimana hummed to life as a burst of speed sent the ancient ark into the heavens. Glistening in the day's first rays, Vimana shot towards the sea of black feathers which shrouded Teep's castle in an impressive display of speed. Like the sun rising to pierce the darkness, Vimana descended onto Teep's castle with doves flocking away from the golden ship. Unlike the sun that brought forth life and a new day, Vimana only brought death. Descending from the hull, containers pelted the courtyard of Teep's castle. Upon contact, the containers released a hideous haze of black. Spreading in a frenzy, the poisonous gas expanded until it soon consumed the entire courtyard, contaminating the air with the deadly plumes of unbreathable chemicals. The effects were instantaneous. Like fish out of water, the vampires that had been the first to fall victim to the chemicals began thrashing around, clutching their throats in desperate attempts to release the deadly toxins they had just breathed in. Vampires fell by the dozens, all falling victim to the horrendous chemicals Semiramis had been so keen to deliver. The few that had managed to escape the toxin were left in a state of shock. The walls that had been once claimed impenetrable came crashing down. Massive stone giants crushed the aging walls with no hesitation in their movements. Flooding the death-ridden courtyard, golems marched forward. Picking off survivors of the deadly chemical attack, the cries of pain were silenced by the caws of doves shrouding the skies. Valerie Teeps, the head of the House of Teeps and the leader of the Teeps faction, laid lifelessly inside a dimly lit room. Face showing no form of emotion one would possess, the damper merely looked off into the distance. Already mentally and emotionally damaged from possessing the Sephiroth Grawl, she had been exposed to pain offered by the extraction of her sacred gear. Unlike previous wielders of the Sephiroth Grawl, her Longinus was subspecies. Possessing not one, but 3 holy grails instead of one, Valerie remained alive after the painful extraction. Now left inside the dark room, she only looked off into the distance. Ethereal shimmers shrouded her vision, even though one of her 3 holy grails had been extracted, images of the dead still remained. While Valerie stared lifelessly at the spirits, Ryzavim had stood happily over her body with a bold smile in place. "Well, that was fun." Ryzavim chuckled with his smile widening. "We should have Marius arrange another play date." No response. "Oh, don't be like that. Such a look is unfitting of young girls." The door leading inside the room was swiftly opened, allowing Euclid entry. "Lord Ryzavim, we must leave now. The hero faction has slaughtered their way inside. All the vampires left guarding the gate have been killed," Euclid reported with a bow of his head. "There is little time before they find this room. A small group of golems are demolishing this castle as we speak. We must leave now, Lord." Euclid never got to finish his sentence. Silencing the faithful servant was a golden blade that had sheathed itself against the wall mere inches from Ryzavim's head. The sudden attack had caught both devils off guard, but their reactions were immediate. Euclid quickly shifted his body to face the attacker with his magical powers flaring into existence. Ryzavim merely brushed off the blade with a chuckle as his manipulative eyes focused on the attacker. Standing there with Semiramis by his side was Naruto. Golden halos danced against the air behind him, opening paths for an arrangement of polished weaponry to come forth. Leaving so soon? Chapter 6, In the Night. If words were to describe Ryzavim Lucifer, insane was one of the few which truly captured the man in a single frame. For he rose above the normal levels of mental insanity, and personified the very definition. This was a devil who willingly looked for the most destructive force of chaos alive, and the same devil who was going to face a band of heroes with a glowing grin stretched across his features. "Ah, my boy, how nice of you to drop by." Ryzavim cooed in delight, his crazed eyes shining in unmeasurable joy. "Oh, how I wanted to meet you for so long, my boy. Look at you, all grown up. I remember when you were just a mere boy. Frowning at the words, Naruto snapped his fingers once again, and another barrage of weaponry appeared behind him. As if they were shot from a cannon, the weaponry bombarded the two devils in a flash. When the blades, axes, and halberds slammed against the shield of magic erected by the simply dressed devil, Naruto's frown deepened as his will flared and a new weapon appeared. Larger than the previous ones, the halberd shimmered with magical might as it floated a second more before launching at the barrier. Tearing through the rather powerful shield, Naruto gave the devils little time to recover as more and more weapons rained down upon them. Oh ho ho, you grew stronger too. You make me so proud, Naruto boy. The voice remained cheerfully teasing as the smoke screen of dust settled and Naruto eyed the now obliterated room with a critical gaze. Standing in the middle of the destruction had been the two devils without a single scratch on their appearance. The two had managed to find a way to bypass his attack and escape from any possible harm it could have brought. That idea itself angered Naruto. You're still alive, Naruto said simply. Oh, Naruto boy, you're going to have to try harder than that to kill little ol' me. I didn't survive this long just because of my dashing good looks. I would love to play with you further, but I just need to go. Ta-ta for now, Naruto boy, don't forget to drink your milk. And like that, the man vanished. In a flash of light the two devils were consumed by a surge of magic and disappeared to a location unknown. As the town vanished, Naruto's eyes narrowed in rage. Giving a shout of displeasure, the blonde slammed his hand against the wall and crumpled the stone like paper. The audacious behavior of the man had seemingly struck a chord in the blonde. In his struggle to obtain power against the scornful scoff of the higher powers had helped little in his own reaction to the teasing words of his former opponent. That bastard! Scowling at the events, Mordred gave a scoff before turning her attention toward the enraged blonde and Semiramis. Emotions masked behind her crafty smile, the witch strode forward in long, graceful strides. Moving forward without the consent of the enraged Naruto, Semiramis scanned the room the two devils had left from. Smile growing at the contents inside, the alluring woman flashed Naruto an all too pleasing smile. It seems our efforts were not in vain, Semiramis proclaimed. Stretching her arms out open, she shifted her body in order to display the contents within the room. Whatever the devils were after, it was not the sacred gear wielder. She's still breathing. Reigning in the burning rage which had consumed him seconds ago, Naruto nodded his head and beckoned for Mordred to approach. Accepting the wordless order, the knight strode right into the room and scooped up the unconscious vampire in her arms. As Mordred walked out with the vampire, Naruto took in the beautiful appearance of the young woman. Her short, bleached blonde hair seemingly shimmered under the small rays of the sun. The pair of sharpened canines in combination to the girl's delicate features, Naruto took notice of the natural beauty the girl wielded. In contrast to Semiramis' seductive beauty, the vampires produced a sense of innocence, rather than raw seduction. TCH, let's go. That skinny bastard was all talk, Mordred complained in a sharp call. He didn't even fight me. Accepting the words with another nod, Naruto swiftly turned and led the girls out of the ruined castle. Trudging through the cluster of bodies littered in the halls with blood stains plastered against the walls, Naruto gave little attention to the gore he had contributed to. Taking a sharp turn toward the courtyard, the blonde hero beckoned for the unmoving golems toward the castle. Spreading them all over the ruined structure, Naruto continued to walk forward with the two following silently. Uzumaki, why did you send? Mordred never finished. In a flash, the crude echoes of destructive explosions filled the air. Tearing through the once beautiful Teep's castle, the golems successfully brought down the structure, leaving remnants of the foundation scorched. The sudden sound had brought forth an expression of surprise and awe clashing upon Mordred's visage as Semiramis continued to smirk. Ah, how cruel, Naruto. Chapter 7, Calm Before the Storm. For Cao Cao, his vision of the hero faction greatly collided with the image of his dear friends. It had been a small difference at first, but through the years it had grown to the point where thoughts of mutiny had been a common occurrence. Throughout his years leading alongside the blonde, the subtle changes in his personality had been obvious for quite some time. For the longest time, he had been alone. The only things accompanying the blonde was his own thoughts. But in the coming weeks, Kinkin noticed a change in his longtime friend's behavior. His stern and demanding personality had been, lax, a great deal more subdued than previously. The change was out of nowhere, until he had caught sight of the young girl walking the halls of the castle. Asia Argento, or Asia Uzumaki, had been a resident of the castle for less than a month, and her effects on the battle-hardened warriors were noticeable. The women that supported Naruto were quite fond of the girl, while other male supporters such as Avisprin regarded the girl without much emotion. The more devoted ones such as Diarmuid had seemingly devoted his very being to the girl. It was expected, after all, that Naruto's faction was built upon loyalty. It was not a surprise after all. Leonardo, Go and help Siegfried. While he does not wish to be bothered, I wish for extra insurance we will capture the girl. Cao Cao said as he turned his attention toward the small child seated in the corner of the room. Under the shadows, the second leader of the hero faction easily made out the nod of the child. Making sure she comes back alive, dealing with an enraged Naruto is not a part of my plans. His only response was a second nod. Good, now Heracles, I need you and George to slow down Naruto and his party. Cao Cao called out to the remaining members of the room. I need you two to capture Semiramis if you can, if not, kill her. The castle will float without her. The shuffling of footsteps were heard after his words had echoed throughout the room. A gruff grunt had been his only response as his eyes caught sight of his friend and most trusted companion, George, preparing a magic circle for transportation. Sending the two of them had been a smart move, in his opinion. While George would be extremely useful in buying time for his plans, Heracles would be capable of potentially taking blows from the gate of Babylon. If not, the bloodthirsty descendant of the original Greek hero would be a fine distraction. As the flash of a magic circle enveloped the room, Cao Cao released a humorless chuckle. Here's to us, Naruto. Come on, you witch. Hurry up with that spell of yours. The annoyed voice of Mordred snapped aloud. I want to be out of this bug-infested forest. I have half a mind to leave you in this place. Semiramis responded with a sly smile stretching across her visage. After all, I don't believe our dear Naruto would miss a brute such as yourself, you little. Before their current spat could even escalate, Naruto raised his hand and uttered stop. Heeding his words, the two girls turned from each other and focused on their respective tasks. Semiramis was preparing a magic circle for transportation back to the castle while Mordred was tasked with keeping watch. They had not been in the small clearing for long, but it had been enough time to peeve the hot-headed knight. Yet, as the two traded silent glares, Naruto could not shake the dread in his body. His senses had never been truly wrong, he had always followed his gut, and it had paid off. As he pondered on the feeling, a tense feeling overcame him as a glowing circle of magic appeared before them. The magic circle was easily identifiable. It belonged to George, Cao Cao's right hand. It seems our friends decided to pay us a visit. Mordred muttered. Just as her words were said, two figures appeared from the transportation circle, George himself in the magician robes he commonly donned and a brute of man garbed in armor paying homage to the Greeks. The two were easily enough to be identified by Naruto. While he personally knew George, the second man, Heracles was only a mentioned member of Cao Cao's supporters during their meetings. George, why are you here? Naruto asked, his voice tense and eyes narrowed. Has Cao Cao finally decided to put his plans in motion? His questions were not answered, however. The only response he received was silence as the two regarded them with little emotion playing on their faces. But for Naruto, the silence had been enough. The two were here under the orders of Cao Cao, and knowing his longtime friend, they were not here for support. Snapping his fingers and forcing a number of portals to open, Naruto readied the weaponry as the two figures remained still. Heh, I wonder what a blonde can do. Heracles cackled as he cracked his knuckles and a violent gleam entered his eyes. Don't disappoint me now, blonde. Charging forward at speeds that people in his body type found impossible, the brute brought a fist forward and punched the air. The glowing aura surrounding him seemingly grew, and the area surrounding his fist exploded in a flash of magical energy. The explosion could have been a potential kill for Heracles, if he were fighting some low-level threats, but Naruto took note of the aura and opted for a shield to be summoned before him, shrouding his companions and himself from the explosion. His actions did little to weaken Heracles' determination. Following the first punch, a barrage of explosive punches followed, crashing against the golden shield. Mord, go for George, Naruto ordered. He then turned his attention towards Semiramis. You finish the portal and keep the girl safe. We will handle these two. Nodding her head, Semiramis continued her work on the portal. While normally, portals were easily enough to finish, the young woman had finally noticed the surroundings. Gone were the blue sky, replaced with a kaleidoscope of colors. Frowning, Semiramis had finally figured out as to why her normal spells had failed. George had transported the forest they occupied to the dimension gap. You bastard! Quit hiding behind that damned shield. Heracles growled in a fit of annoyed rage. Acknowledging the words with a snap of his fingers, Naruto returned the shield to the treasury as he prepared to take on the enraged brute with his other weapons. Playing defensively was a smart move, but time was not in his favor. Cao Cao had made that clear when he had sent two of his goons to face him, both of them skilled in tactics meant to slow down their opponents. While George personified that, Heracles was a mere distraction to keep himself and his companions away from the dimension-lost wielder. Jumping back and dodging an explosive punch, Naruto eyed the muscular man shrouded in the explosive aura and considered his options. "Quit dodging, you coward!" The enraged growls which escaped the lips of Heracles were responded in kind with a barrage of golden weaponry. The numerous objects ranging from blades to halberds demolished the ground where Heracles stood upon, sending a flurry of finely pounded dust and rubble into the air. Eyeing the destruction in wake of his weapons, Naruto's eyes caught the figure of his opponent on the ground, held still by a number of his blades. Walking forward, Naruto called upon a blade as he brushed off the dust still lingering in the air. The end results had been expected. A sacred gear which exploded with physical motion was a seemingly ideal match against his Gate of Babylon, but the sacred gear was nowhere near as powerful as the multiplicity of weaponry resting in the treasury. "I expected more," Naruto said aloud. "All that talk, and no actions to back it up. Why, you bastard!" Heracles howled once again, his eyes filled with murderous rage. "I'll kill you! I'll kill you, you hear?" Ignoring his words, Naruto's attention was entrapped by the raging battle a small distance away. There, Mordred was being kept at a distance by George and his wide range of magic, pushing for a ranged fight rather than close quarters where his weakness lay. The rage in Mordred's eyes were obvious as she continued to growl in hatred when her attempts to close in on the magician was stopped by either a spell or the annoying sacred gear of his. Raising the blade, Naruto easily took off the head of the growling brute in a swift flick of his wrist. "Semiramis, how does the spell go?" "Good, we are leaving." Mordred, growling, the blind swordsman slowly backed away as she held her sword up. Ignoring the words of the other blonde, the enraged woman charged forward and sliced through the bolt of magic which was shot in retaliation. And once again, before her blade was embedded into the flesh of his opponent, George quickly vanished from the spot with assistance from his Longinus. "Give up, you three will never escape. My abilities are made for such situations. No matter how powerful you three may be, it is no match for my dimension lost." George chuckled with a wide smirk stretched across his visage. "That sword of yours won't do anything against me if it can't hit me now." "Mordred, we are leaving!" Naruto called out. Now, backing away reluctantly, Mordred gave the man a death glare as she quickly sprinted back toward her companions. Her retreat was covered by Naruto as a gleaming blade flew overhead and pelted the magician before he could retaliate. Finally, reaching the fore, Mordred gave the other blonde a glare of annoyance as she waited on Semiramis' transportation spell. "This isn't over, you bastard," Mordred growled. "I'll have your head next time." Leonardo had found himself standing beside Siegfried as the two of them had a stare-off with Diarmuid in the halls. The shadows at his feet were moving slowly, awaiting his commands to form into the monsters of his desire. The two weapon users were glaring at one another as the emotionless child wandered off toward the target. His silent steps were noticed by Diarmuid as he rushed to stop him, only to meet the resistance of Siegfried. As their weapons clashed, Leonardo silently opened the door leading to the target and found himself facing the innocent smile of the girl Chow Chow had wanted. "Oh, are you here to play with me?" The sweet voice of Asia wondered aloud as her face lit up in a bright smile. "Oh, I'm so excited. After my big brother left for his little trip, I could only play with Mr. Diarmuid." Rushing forward, Leonardo immediately prepared his Longinus to create a monster to aid him, only to find himself being dragged forward by the little girl. The shadow vanishing from his feet, Leonardo's silent recoil of the gentle touch was easily noticed by Asia. Raising his eyes to meet the ones of his supposed target, Leonardo found himself nervous. The feeling had been foreign to him, it had never been an emotion he had experienced before, all he felt was the isolation he had experienced for the longest time. An experience that led to his current, emotionless self. No emotions had been experienced for the longest time under Chow Chow, but here he was, standing before the girl he was supposed to capture, too nervous to make a move. As the emotions buried deep in his body played out, he found himself asking a simple question: "Why? I'm not going to hurt you, I just want to play." Feeling the edges of his mouth twitch into a barely unnoticeable frown, Leonardo almost snorted at her words. The little girl truly did not know about him. Unlike the other kids in his orphanage, the girl did not fear him for his annihilation maker. If the words were ever true, he would be very surprised. After all, he had always been the one to hurt others, not the other way around. His monsters and the emotions which controlled him had caused a great deal of grief in his life. It always had made sure he was alone. Yet, the innocent gaze of the young child and her pleading visage had struck a chord in him. "Oh, okay," Leonardo made out in a silent voice. "Oh, let's play." Beaming with unconfined joy and excitement, Asia gave a little cheer as she dragged the silent Longinus wielder toward her chest of toys Naruto had been kind enough to supply her with. Pulling out a number of toys of various sizes and themes, The young Uzumaki sat on the soft carpet decorating her small play area and turned her attention toward Leonardo. I'm Asia. Nice to meet you, Asia said with a cheery smile decorating her visage. What's your name? El Leonardo. The young child managed to mutter. And my name's El Leonardo. Nice to meet you, Leonardo. Do you want to be my friend? Mouth scrunched in anticipation, Asia turned her hopeful eyes toward the young lad. The question had been sudden, but fit for their age. Though it was common to make friends with only an introduction, Asia had always been a victim to her sacred gear. The small, yet surprisingly useful abilities of it had kept her at a distance from the other children. They had either seen her as a freak or unapproachable. Though it was considered a gift before her explosion from the ranks of the church, it served as an unthinkable curse. Friends? For the second time, Leonardo was surprised by the girl. He had never expected to be asked the question. Hell, he never even planned on joining the girl in her festivities. His thoughts of the mission were simple: get in, get out. But here he was, sitting on a carpet with the girl surrounded by various toys. His mind had been stuck on the idea of having a friend. He was always lonely. Chow Chow had recruited him roughly a year ago, and he had been with the group ever since. None of the members were around his age, and among them, none of them had truly connected with the child. They had held some form of respect for him, but never tried to befriend him. So, when he had accepted the offer, he had escaped a life of total isolation for a life of loneliness. Why you want to be my friend? Leonardo asked, his eyes filled with disbelief. Why yeah. Asia replied hesitantly. Don't you think I'm a monster? What? No. Blinking at the girl, Leonardo decided to show the girl the reasoning behind his question. If she feared it and him, which he thought highly probable, he would continue on with the mission. Closing his eyes in concentration, Leonardo felt the familiar flow of magic from his sacred gear as his mind wandered toward an image of a monster. Shadows twisted around his form as they took on the form of a man. Standing taller than both of the children combined, the shadows shrouding the man vanished. The newly formed man held the appearance of a knight. The armor garbed around its body alongside the helmet easily allowed Asia to identify the all-too-familiar man, or in this case, toy. In her hands was a toy of the same man standing before them. That's so cool, Asia said with a wave of excitement pouring onto her visage. Leo, that's so cool. Eyes widening at the words, Leonardo took note of the nickname she had graced him with, and he could not hold himself as a small wave of happiness and excitement took hold of his heart. Though it was simple and seemed like an offhand name, the nickname meant a great deal to the boy. It had been the first time someone had been kind enough to call him that, or even his name in such a friendly tone, rather than the hesitant or fearful voices the children of his past had graced him with. You have to show me more, Asia said. Oh, okay. Asia. The clashing of steel rang in the hall leading to Naruto's bedroom. Synchronizing with the ringing of metal were the grunts of the fighters. Their attempts to overpower one another had left a great deal of damage to the wide halls. A number of slashes and piercings in the walls had easily showcased the power the two had been fighting with. In addition to the damaged walls and floors, rubble which accumulated in masses spoke volumes of the destruction to come. Though the fight had been quite short thus far, either party could truly say they were not feeling the effects of their physical confrontation. Give up, Siegfried. I will not allow you to lay a hand on Lady Asia, Diarmuid declared as he readied his spear once again. Once I am finished with you, I shall defeat Leonardo. The lady shall be safe under my watch. Humph, I don't think so, Diarmuid. Siegfried grunted as the thought of Leonardo brought a smile to his face. That little brat already captured the girl, it's only a matter of time before he takes her to Chow Chow. I don't think you'll be able to do anything about it. Laughing at his own words, Siegfried twirled Graham around in his hands as he found humor in the ideas of his self-declared rival failing at the one task he had been assigned to. The mere idea of Diarmuid, the all-so-perfect knight, failing at a mission assigned to him, was an opportunity he did not want to miss out on. Watching the all-so-loyal knight fail would be the highlight of his day. I will never fail, my lord, Diarmuid yelled as he charged forward, thrusting his spear at the chest of his opponent. The spearman found his swift jab parried by the blade of his opponent. Throwing more force onto his strike, Diarmuid pulled away and returned for a leg sweep in a single, fluid motion. Backing away, Siegfried spotted his opening and bashed his shoulder against his opponent, and sent the spearman tumbling backwards. Taking the opportunity to strike, he raised Graham and readied, but his potentially fatal blow was soon parried. The enraged yell of Diarmuid fueled his shove as he pushed the swordsman back and stabbed Siegfried at his armored shoulder. TCH, a lucky strike, Siegfried hissed. But no matter, this match is over. I bought Leonardo enough time. We shall continue this next time. Holding Graham up, Siegfried allowed the blade to shimmer in a dull purple light as it changed into another blade. Bam. The blade glowed as a power gust of wind tore through the halls, covering his retreat. Shielding his eyes from the winds, Diarmuid growled at the disappearance of his opponent, and quickly ran toward the door. Slamming the door opened, Diarmuid prepared for the worst, but his eyes caught a sight he had never expected to see. Seated together with toys laying before them were Asia and Leonardo. Lady Asia, get away from him! Diarmuid yelled as he ran to the side of the blonde girl and readied his spear. Stay behind me, my lady. He is dangerous. Frowning at the words, Leonardo readied his Longinus as he glared at Diarmuid and prepared for a fight. Diarmuid, on the other hand, prepared all of his options. Before the situation could get out of hand, Asia jumped from behind Diarmuid and ran between the two. Stop! Mr. Diarmuid, Leo isn't here to hurt me. He's my friend, Asia proclaimed as she stretched her arms out to prevent the two from fighting. Leo, don't fight, Mr. Diarmuid is just here to protect me. The calming words of the girl caught the two by surprise, her bodyguard more so than her new friend. Diarmuid took the news quite well, other than the wide eyes and gaping mouth, that is. Taking a few seconds to process the words, Diarmuid eyed the boy with a calculative gaze as he pondered his options once again. He could not simply disobey the orders of Asia. After all, the orders of Asia were the orders of Naruto. But, having Leonardo, a member of the enemy faction so close to his lord's sister, was simply a terrible idea. Lady Asia? Could he be trusted? Diarmuid finally asked, his tone subdued and his eyes wandering toward the small child who possessed one of the most dangerous Longinus ever. Yes, he's my friend, Asia replied without hesitation. I trust him, Mr. Diarmuid. Very well, my lady. Backing off the topic with a nod of his head, Diarmuid took a position near the door and focused on watching his charge. That was all he could do. Currently, he was in a position that left him in need of more assistance. He could not leave Asia alone with a member of Cao Cao's faction. Nor could he fight off Siegfried if he ever came back for Asia once he found out Leonardo was here. Split up, Mordred, you head to Avisprin's lab and gather him. Semiramis, you're with me, Naruto ordered as he swiftly strode down the hall. Once everything is alright and no more of Cao Cao's faction is near, we will meet in the throne room. Make sure you are not followed, whatever Uzumaki. Mordred huffed out as she stalked off to the lower levels of the castle to locate Avisprin. Just make sure that you don't do anything stupid. Ignoring her words, Semiramis focused her attention on the blonde she was following. As she strolled beside Naruto, one of her birds flew toward her. She allowed it to land on her shoulder. Taking a single glance at the bird, Semiramis returned her attention to the empty halls. They're gathering, Semiramis said as she gave a small rub on the bird's belly. The contingencies are in place, but there are still some loose ends still. What are your orders?